The morning light filtered through the reinforced windows of the Riverside Security Operations Center as Maya Reeves adjusted the tactical vest that felt 2 sizes too large against her petite frame. At just 5 feet 2 inches and weighing barely 115 pounds, she had spent the last 7 years listening to the same tired refrain. She was too small, too weak, too fragile to be a real security operative. Yet here she stood, about to face the most terrifying ordeal of her life. 9 heavily armed assailants would corner her unit in the industrial sector of Port Harborview, and in a moment of pure survival instinct, she would disable all of them alone, forever changing how the world saw her. The Riverside Security Operations Center was one of the most prestigious private military contracting firms in the country, operating out of the sprawling facility in Port Harborview, a coastal industrial city known for its bustling port traffic and, unfortunately, its growing criminal underworld. The facility sprawled across 12 acres of concrete and chain-link fencing, housing training grounds, armories, administrative buildings, and barracks for over 300 security personnel. Maya had been part of the Alpha Tactical Unit for 3 years now, but she had never truly felt like she belonged. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The morning of the incident that would change everything, Maya was running through her pre-mission checklist with the methodical precision that had kept her alive in a job where mistakes could be fatal. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, checking ammunition magazines, securing her radio communications, and ensuring her tactical knife was properly sheathed at her hip. Her green eyes, sharp and focused despite her youthful appearance, scanned each piece of equipment with the intensity of someone who understood that her life, and the lives of others, depended on getting every detail right. The Alpha Tactical Unit consisted of 12 highly trained operatives, and Maya was the only woman among them. More significantly, she was the only operative under 6 feet tall and under 200 pounds. Her team leader, Commander David Kerrigan, was a towering figure at 6 feet 4 inches, with the weathered face of someone who had spent 15 years in elite security operations across 3 continents. Beside him stood Sergeant James Thorne, equally imposing at 6 feet 3 inches, whose scarred knuckles told stories of countless confrontations. These were the kind of men who looked like they belonged in tactical gear. Maya, with her slight build and delicate features, looked like she belonged in a college library. The mission briefing that morning was routine, or so it seemed. The Alpha unit had been contracted to escort a high-value package through the industrial sector of Port Harborview, specifically through the warehouse district where a shipment of communications equipment needed to be transported from Port Authority Storage Facility 7 to a secure location 12 miles away. The route took them through some of the roughest neighborhoods in the city, where gang activity and organized crime had been escalating over the past 6 months. It was dangerous work, the kind that paid well precisely because it carried significant risk. Maya had been assigned to this mission despite the reservations of several senior operators. In the weeks leading up to this date, she had overheard conversations, sometimes not even bothered to be whispered, questioning her presence on the team. "She's going to slow us down," one operator named Richard Cole had said during a training session. "If things go sideways, she's a liability," another chimed in. Commander Kerrigan had never said such things directly to her, but she sensed his doubts. He had chosen her for this mission anyway, though whether it was because he believed in her capabilities or because he was willing to give her a chance to prove herself, she couldn't quite determine. The reason Maya had become a security operative in the first place was deeply personal. Her older brother, Thomas Reeves, had been a police officer in Port Harborview for 8 years before he was killed during a routine traffic stop when Maya was just 17. The man who shot him had been described as small and non-threatening in appearance, which was exactly why Thomas hadn't seen the threat coming. Thomas's death had taught Maya that size and appearance meant nothing when it came to danger, capability, or courage. She had enlisted in the security field to honor his memory and to prove that anyone, regardless of their physical stature, could be formidable when properly trained and mentally prepared. Her trainer during the initial selection process, former Marine officer Colonel Raymond Foster, had been one of the few people who seemed to understand what Maya was trying to accomplish. Foster, now retired but still consulting with the Riverside facility, had worked with her extensively on technique-based combat rather than strength-based approaches. Size is just a number, Foster had told her repeatedly during their sessions. What matters is leverage, timing, positioning, and mental clarity. A person who understands how the human body moves can control someone twice their size if they're smart about it. He had shown her how to use an opponent's momentum against them, how to exploit the vulnerabilities in the human skeleton, how to remain calm when facing someone physically superior. As Maya stood in the operations center that morning, she thought about Foster's words. She also thought about the incident that had occurred 2 weeks earlier during a training exercise. During a scenario designed to test the unit's response to multiple threats, Maya had been sparring with operator Marcus Webb, a 240-pound veteran with a decade of field experience. Webb had been dismissive of her presence, treating the exercise more like an opportunity to prove his dominance than as a genuine training scenario. When Maya had executed a perfect armbar takedown, using his own aggression against him, Webb had hit the mat hard. The entire training room had gone silent. Webb's face had flushed with embarrassment as he lay on the ground, momentarily stunned that someone he outweighed by over 125 pounds had just incapacitated him. The incident had not endeared her to many of the male operators. If anything, it had intensified the resentment. Some of the men seemed to view her technical expertise as a fluke, a lucky move rather than evidence of genuine skill. Others seemed to take it personally, as if her competence somehow threatened their masculinity or their place in the unit. Commander Kerrigan had handled the situation professionally, but Maya could see the discomfort in his expression. In his world, the world of tactical operations and private military contracting, physical dominance was the currency of respect, and Maya simply didn't fit that mold. As she checked her communications equipment one final time, Maya's teammate, Officer Patricia Patty Gonzalez, approached her. Gonzalez was one of the few female support personnel at the facility, working in logistics and equipment management. She had become something of an ally to Maya, one of the few people on the base who seemed to genuinely support her presence rather than tolerate it. "You good for today?" Gonzalez asked, her tone casual but her eyes searching. "Yeah, I'm ready," Maya replied, meeting her gaze steadily. Gonzalez leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Some of the guys are saying they hope you mess up today. They're actually betting that you'll freeze or panic when things get intense. Don't let that get to you." Maya felt a familiar tightness in her chest, but she forced herself to breathe through it. She had known that some members of the unit harbored resentment toward her presence. She had expected that this mission might be an opportunity for certain operators to see her fail. What she hadn't anticipated, what no one could have anticipated, was that today's mission would transform from a routine escort operation into a desperate fight for survival that would define not just her career, but the entire future of women in tactical security operations at Riverside. As Commander Kerrigan called everyone to the briefing room for final preparations, Maya gathered her gear and moved toward the door. She caught her reflection in one of the polished metal surfaces of the equipment rack. A small woman in oversized tactical gear, pale with the weight of expectation and doubt pressing down on her shoulders. She straightened her shoulders and adjusted her vest one more time. She had spent 7 years trying to prove she belonged here. She had no idea that in the next 8 hours, she would have to prove it in the most brutal way imaginable. The briefing room fell silent as Commander Kerrigan dimmed the lights and activated the projection screen displaying the route map for the day's mission. The industrial sector of Port Harborview stretched across the screen in detailed topographical relief, with the warehouse district highlighted in red, a visual indicator of the danger zone they would be traversing. But the real threat didn't come from the landscape itself. It came from a man named Victor Dreskoff, though most people in Port Harborview knew him only by his street name, the Sentinel, and according to the intelligence reports that had been compiled over the past 72 hours, he had made it very clear that he wanted what they were transporting. Victor Dreskoff was a 48-year-old Russian expatriate who had spent the last 15 years building one of the most sophisticated criminal enterprises in the Pacific Northwest. He controlled everything from port smuggling operations to underground weapons trafficking, and he did it with a ruthlessness that had earned him both fear and respect throughout the criminal underworld. What made Dreskoff particularly dangerous was not just his network of operatives or his financial resources. It was his absolute conviction that he was entitled to whatever he wanted, and his willingness to use extreme violence to obtain it. He had never been arrested. He had never been successfully prosecuted. And he had never allowed anyone to stand in his way without suffering severe consequences. Intelligence indicates that Dreskov has been monitoring our communications, Commander Kerrigan explained, his gravelly voice cutting through the tension in the room. 3 days ago, we intercepted communications between his organization and external parties discussing the equipment shipment we're transporting today. The value of the package is approximately $4.2 million, but that's not really what this is about. Dreskov has made it a matter of pride that nothing moves through his territory without his knowledge and approval. Kerrigan clicked to the next slide, displaying surveillance photographs of Dreskov himself. The man in the images was striking in his appearance. Silver-haired, impeccably dressed in expensive suits, his face bearing the weathered lines of someone who had lived a life of constant conflict. But there was something else in his expression, something cold and calculating that made Maya's stomach tighten slightly. This was not a man who would accept failure or resistance with grace. Dreskov has been consolidating power in this region for months, continued Captain Sarah Chun, the unit's intelligence officer. No relation to the restricted names Maya had been instructed to avoid. He's brought in additional muscle from out of state. We've identified at least 7 new operatives working directly under his command, all with extensive combat backgrounds. Some have served in private military contracting themselves, which means they understand tactical operations and won't be easily intimidated. The slideshow progressed to photographs of these new operatives. Each image showed hard men with the bearing of professional soldiers. Their tattoos and scars suggested extensive experience with violence. These were not common street thugs. These were trained combatants who understood small unit tactics, defensive positioning, and coordinated assault strategies. Operator Richard Cole, the one who had been most vocal about Maya's unsuitability for fieldwork, leaned back in his chair with a smirk. So basically, Dreskov's throwing everything he's got at us to prove a point, he said. This isn't about the equipment. It's about ego. It's about showing that he controls this territory. Exactly, Kerrigan confirmed. Which means he won't back down easily. If we encounter resistance, it will be coordinated, professional, and designed to overwhelm us through superior force and tactical competence. This isn't a gang confrontation. This is going to be a full military-style assault if it happens. Maya listened intently, her mind processing the information and the implications. The Alpha unit was well-trained and well-equipped, but they were also outnumbered if Dreskov committed all his resources to stopping them. A tactical unit of 12 operatives against Dreskov's expanded crew could be problematic, especially in urban terrain where his people would have the advantage of local knowledge. Officer James Hartley, the unit's weapons specialist, raised his hand with a question. What's our rules of engagement if we're engaged? Standard protocols, Kerrigan replied. We use minimum necessary force to protect ourselves and the asset. If Dreskov's people try to intercept us, we defend ourselves accordingly. But I want to be clear, this is a security mission, not a combat deployment. We're trying to complete our contract, not start a war in the streets of Port Harborview. The briefing continued with tactical details, the exact route they would take, the timing windows they needed to maintain, communication protocols, emergency response procedures. Maya absorbed every detail with the focused intensity that had defined her approach to this job since day one. Where others might have felt overwhelmed or intimidated, she felt the familiar calm that came when facing a clearly defined problem that required a clearly executed solution. As the briefing wrapped up, Kerrigan pulled up one final image, a photograph of Dreskov at what appeared to be an upscale restaurant, photographed from a distance by surveillance operatives. He was seated across from a man Maya recognized immediately from previous briefings. Colonel Marcus Whitmore, a retired military officer who now served as a consultant to various law enforcement and security agencies. Whitmore had been present at the Riverside facility approximately 6 months earlier, evaluating their tactical protocols and training methodologies. Colonel Whitmore has been in the region for the past week, Kerrigan explained, and we've received intelligence suggesting he's been meeting with Dreskov. We're not entirely certain what their arrangement is, but it appears Whitmore may be providing tactical advice to Dreskoff's operation. This elevates the threat level significantly because it means Dreskoff will have professional military guidance on how to counter our approach. The room erupted in quiet conversations. The revelation that a respected former military officer might be working with a criminal organization was shocking. But what struck Maya most was the realization that today's mission had become something far more complex than a simple security escort. Dreskoff was no longer just a common criminal throwing weight around. He had professional military expertise backing him. He had resources. He had motivation. And he had made it absolutely clear that he intended to intercept their package, either by purchase, intimidation, or force. After the briefing concluded and the team was dismissed to prepare their equipment, Maya found herself in the armory, selecting ammunition and checking her tactical rifle. Operator Thomas Ridley, a relatively newer member of the team who had always been neutral toward her, approached and leaned against the weapons rack. "Heavy briefing," Ridley observed casually. "Yeah," Maya agreed, not looking up from her ammunition inventory. "Some of the guys are saying this is going to be messy," Ridley continued. "That Dreskoff isn't going to let us just walk through his territory with that equipment. They're saying he's probably going to hit us hard and fast, maybe try to divide our unit and pick people off." Maya glanced at him, studying his expression. "Are you trying to intimidate me? Or are you actually providing useful intelligence?" Ridley smiled slightly. "Useful intelligence. I like your directness. Look, whatever people say about you being too small or too weak, I've seen your work. I've seen your training records. You're solid. But today might be different. Today might be the kind of situation where brute force and size matter more than technique and intelligence. Just be aware of that." It was perhaps the most genuine support anyone on the team had offered her, and it also contained an edge of doubt. Maya nodded her appreciation but said nothing. She understood what Ridley was implying, that in a large-scale tactical assault against a numerically superior force, her smaller stature and lighter weight might become a liability rather than a tactical advantage. As she finished her preparations, Maya thought about her brother Thomas again. He had been a good cop, physically fit and well-trained, but he had also been vulnerable because he was human. Size hadn't protected him. Training hadn't protected him. The only thing that had mattered in that moment was someone else's willingness to do violence. And today, facing Viktor Dreskoff and his expanding criminal empire, that willingness was about to be tested in ways Maya could barely anticipate. The morning sun continued to climb in the sky outside the Riverside facility, and with each passing hour, the weight of the mission pressed heavier on everyone's shoulders. They all understood that before the day was over, their training, their courage, and their ability to function under extreme stress would be tested in ways that might determine who lived and who didn't. And somewhere in Port Harborview, Viktor Dreskoff was preparing for his own assault, confident that his superior numbers and professional military guidance would be more than enough to stop a security unit from completing their contract. Neither side had any idea how wrong their assumptions would turn out to be. The training facility at Riverside sprawled across a massive concrete expanse, its various stations and obstacle courses representing years of accumulated knowledge about preparing operatives for real-world threats. Maya moved through the preparation area with her usual methodical approach, but today felt different. The weight of the intelligence briefing, the knowledge of Dreskoff's intentions, and the ambient skepticism from her teammates created a pressure that even her years of experience couldn't entirely suppress. Commander Kerrigan had called a secondary tactical session immediately after the main briefing, and this was where the real preparation would happen. The 12 members of the Alpha unit gathered in the tactics room, a space designed specifically for planning complex operational responses. The walls were lined with tactical maps, communication systems, and equipment configurations. At the center of the room sat a large table displaying a three-dimensional scale model of the industrial sector route they would be taking. Kerrigan stood at the head of the table, his imposing frame silhouetted against the illuminated map. Next to him stood another figure, someone who immediately captured Maya's attention. This was Dr. Eleanor Harford, the facility's close-quarters combat and tactical theory specialist. Harford was a striking woman in her early 60s, with steel-gray hair pulled back in a tight bun and eyes that seemed to assess everything they looked at with clinical precision. She had spent 20 years in law enforcement tactical operations before transitioning into training and consulting work. More importantly, she had been one of the first women to break into elite tactical roles in American law enforcement, and she understood the unique challenges that Maya faced. "Listen up," Kerrigan began, pointing to various positions on the tactical model. "Based on the intelligence briefing, we need to assume that Dreskov's organization has mapped our route. They know where we're starting, where we're going, and they have a general idea of the timeline. What they might not know is exactly when we'll be in certain locations, or what tactical variations we might employ. That's where our preparation comes in." Dr. Harford stepped forward, her voice clear and measured. "What we're looking at here is a potential ambush scenario in urban terrain with multiple possible contact points. Dreskov has the advantage of choosing the time and place of engagement. We have the advantage of tactical training and coordination. The key is to minimize his advantages while maximizing ours." She pointed to 3 specific locations on the model, areas where the route would take them through particularly dense warehouse complexes with limited visibility and multiple potential attack vectors. "These 3 zones are the most vulnerable. If I were Dreskov, this is where I would position my assets. Multiple entry and exit points for his operatives. Limited sight lines for our people. Terrain that favors coordinated assault tactics." Operator Cole spoke up immediately, his tone dismissive. "So basically, we're walking into a potential kill zone and hoping our training and equipment are better than his numbers and positioning. That's a hell of a tactical situation." "It is," Kerrigan confirmed without hesitation. "Which is why we're going to prepare for exactly that scenario. Today's training session will focus on multi-threat engagement protocols, situations where we're facing coordinated assault from multiple positions simultaneously. I want everyone ready to respond to contact from any direction at any time." For the next 4 hours, the Alpha unit went through intensive scenario-based training. They practiced rapid response drills where simulated threats came from multiple angles simultaneously. They worked on communication protocols for coordinating defensive positions under fire. They rehearsed extraction procedures for protecting the equipment asset while under sustained assault. The training was exhausting both mentally and physically, but it served a crucial purpose. It embedded muscle memory and tactical responses into their nervous systems so that in the chaos of actual combat, their bodies would know what to do even when conscious thought became difficult. Maya moved through each drill with the focused intensity that had defined her approach to tactical training since her first day at Riverside. She had discovered early on that while she couldn't outstrength her teammates, she could outthink them. She could anticipate movement patterns. She could position herself with maximum efficiency. She could execute complex maneuvers with precision that larger, stronger operatives sometimes struggled with because their size worked against them in tight spaces. Dr. Harford observed Maya particularly closely during the training sessions. When they took a brief break, Harford pulled Maya aside into a quieter section of the facility. "You're carrying extra weight today," Harford observed, not as a judgment but as a simple factual statement. "And I'm not talking about physical weight, psychological weight, pressure, doubt." Maya met her gaze. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to someone who's been where you are," Harford replied. "I spent my first 5 years in tactical operations feeling like I had to be twice as good as the men around me just to prove I belonged. The pressure never really goes away. But what I learned was that the pressure can become your advantage if you process it correctly." "How do I do that?" Maya asked, genuinely curious about Harford's perspective. Harford gestured for them to sit on a nearby bench. "First, understand that your size and strength will never be your primary tactical advantages. Accept that completely. The moment you accept it, you stop wasting mental energy trying to be something you're not. Second, understand that your perceived weakness is actually your greatest strategic asset. Your opponents will underestimate you. They'll expect you to be slow, fragile, ineffectual. When you turn out to be none of those things, you've already won half the psychological battle." She paused, collecting her thoughts before continuing. "Your brother was a police officer, correct? I've read your personnel file." Maya nodded, surprised that Harford knew this detail. "His death is why you joined this field," Harford stated. "It's written all over your approach to training and your commitment to this work." But here's what I want you to understand. You can't change what happened to your brother. But you can change what happens to the people under your protection. You can change what happens to the people on your team. And today, if things go wrong, your ability to remain calm, to think clearly, to execute precise tactical responses, that might be the difference between people living and people dying. Not your size, not your strength, your competence. The words settled into Maya with an unexpected weight of clarity. She had spent so much time trying to overcome the perception of her weakness that she had sometimes lost sight of her actual strengths. She had been trained by one of the best tactical minds in the country, Colonel Raymond Foster, before he had retired. She had studied advanced combat theory. She understood human biomechanics in ways that many of her larger, stronger teammates didn't. She had spent thousands of hours drilling scenarios and responses until they became intuitive. One more thing, Harford added as they prepared to rejoin the main training group. Dreskov's organization has hired professional operatives. Professional operatives understand that size and strength aren't the ultimate measures of tactical competence. They understand that a smaller person with superior training can control a larger person with inferior training. That's basic tactical reality. Your teammates might not fully understand that yet, but Dreskov's people will. And that means you might be more valuable in a true tactical engagement than your teammates realize. The afternoon training sessions continued with even greater intensity. Kerrigan added variables to the scenario drills, communication blackouts, equipment failures, and unexpected obstacles that would force the team to adapt rapidly to changing circumstances. Maya found herself moving through these scenarios with increasing confidence. Her smaller size, which she had always viewed as a liability, actually proved advantageous in several drill situations. In tight warehouse spaces, she could move with greater agility than her larger teammates. Her lower center of gravity made her more stable when operating at odd angles. Her lighter weight meant she could move quickly across uncertain terrain without the risk of structural failure. During one particular drill, Kerrigan set up a scenario where one operative was supposedly injured and incapacitated. The team had to extract that operative while simultaneously maintaining defensive positions against a simulated multidirectional assault. Operator Cole was the simulated casualty, lying on the ground claiming his leg was broken. The team needed to move him to safety while 3 instructors with training weapons simulated attackers from various positions. When it came time for someone to physically extract Cole from the dangerous position and move him to cover, most of the team hesitated. Cole weighed over 220 pounds, and extracting him while maintaining combat readiness seemed like a task suited for the larger, stronger operatives. But Maya had trained extensively in extraction techniques with Dr. Harford, techniques that didn't rely on brute strength but rather on proper body positioning and leverage. She moved forward without hesitation, positioning herself beneath Cole's arm and using her leverage to lift him while distributing his weight effectively across her body. Despite his significant weight advantage, she was able to move him with surprising efficiency toward the designated cover position, executing the extraction in less time than any of the larger operatives had managed in previous drills. Kerrigan observed silently as she completed the extraction, meeting simulated fire from the training instructors while maintaining Cole's security. When the drill ended, there was a noticeable change in the atmosphere of the training room. Even Cole, who had been skeptical of her presence on the team, gave her a respectful nod as he stood back up. "Effective technique," Kerrigan commented to the group. "That's what I want to see today. Technique, positioning, and tactical execution overcoming physical limitations. If Dreskov hits us today, it's going to be messy and unpredictable. But if we maintain our training discipline, execute our protocols, and trust in our preparation, we can come through it." As the afternoon training session concluded, Dr. Harford pulled Maya aside one final time. "You're ready for whatever happens today," Harford said with quiet confidence. "Not because you're the strongest or the biggest, but because you've done the work. You've trained harder than most of your teammates. You understand the theory. You've prepared mentally and physically for this exact scenario. Trust that preparation. Trust yourself. And remember, your brother would be proud of the operative you've become." The words resonated deeply with Maya as she gathered her equipment for the final preparations. The mission was now only hours away. Dreskov was planning his assault. Commander Kerrigan was finalizing his tactical response. And Maya was preparing herself mentally and physically for whatever chaos the day would bring, armed not with superior strength, but with years of focused training, tactical knowledge, and the unshakable belief that technique and preparation could overcome almost any obstacle. The sun was beginning its descent toward the afternoon horizon as the Alpha unit made final preparations in the equipment bay. Within the next 3 hours, they would depart Riverside for the industrial sector of Port Harborview. Within the next 6 hours, the plan that Dreskov had developed would collide with the training that Maya and her unit had undergone. And within the next 12 hours, lives would be changed forever. The convoy departed Riverside Security Operations Center at precisely 2:47 p.m., exactly 17 minutes ahead of schedule. Commander Kerrigan had made the tactical decision to vary their departure time by nearly 20 minutes from the original plan, hoping to throw off any surveillance that Dreskov might have positioned at the facility gates. The 3-vehicle convoy consisted of a lead tactical vehicle driven by Officer James Hartley with operators Richard Cole and Thomas Ridley providing security, the central transport vehicle containing the $4.2 million equipment package with Commander Kerrigan at the helm, and a trailing tactical vehicle piloted by Officer Patricia Gonzalez's brother, Officer David Gonzalez, with operators James Thorne and Maya Reeves providing rear security. Maya sat in the rear tactical vehicle, her tactical rifle resting across her lap, her eyes constantly scanning the urban landscape they were passing through. The industrial sector of Port Harborview revealed itself gradually as they navigated away from the more developed downtown areas. Warehouses grew progressively larger, their windows progressively fewer, creating a landscape of massive concrete structures interrupted only by chain-link fencing and weathered loading docks. The streets became less populated, the vehicular traffic more sparse, the general atmosphere increasingly isolating. Officer Thorne, who occupied the front passenger seat with his own weapon ready, maintained constant radio communication with the lead vehicle and the command post back at Riverside. Everything so far had proceeded according to plan. They had navigated through the first 2 potential ambush zones without incident. The intelligence suggesting that Dreskov would position his operatives at certain strategic locations hadn't materialized into actual contact. This fact created a peculiar tension. The absence of the expected threat was somehow more unsettling than an actual encounter would have been. "Command, this is Rear TAC," David Gonzalez transmitted through the radio network, using the standard call sign for their vehicle. "Approaching the 7th Avenue checkpoint. No traffic, no apparent threats. Continuing forward." "Copy that, Rear TAC," came the response from Kerrigan's vehicle. "Lead TAC, do you have visual on the next zone?" "Affirmative, Command. Warehouse District 7 is clear. No activity on rooftops or at ground level. Proceeding through." The convoy rolled deeper into the warehouse district, the structures growing progressively older and more dilapidated. This area of Port Harborview had fallen into industrial decline over the past 2 decades as modern port operations had consolidated into newer facilities. The result was a landscape of abandoned or underutilized buildings, perfect for criminal enterprises that preferred minimal oversight and maximum isolation. Maya maintained her focus on the environment around them, looking for subtle indicators of threat. Movement behind windows, vehicles positioned in ways that suggested occupancy, rooftop positions where someone might be setting up overwatch positions. The training that Dr. Harford had instilled in her emphasized observation of behavioral patterns rather than just visual surveillance. Criminals following tactical protocols would move in certain ways, position themselves with certain logic, and communicate with certain rhythms. The key was to recognize these patterns before they coalesced into actual assault. The convoy slowed as they approached Warehouse District 7, a sprawling complex of interconnected industrial buildings that represented the most dangerous portion of their route, according to the pre-mission intelligence analysis. This was one of the 3 zones that Dr. Harford had identified as having optimal ambush geometry, multiple entry and exit points, limited visibility, buildings tall enough to provide firing positions overlooking the street, and sufficient complexity that coordinating a defense would be challenging. "All units, this is Command." Kerrigan's voice came through the radio with measured calmness. "We are entering the primary risk zone. Maintain heightened alert status. All personnel weapons ready. Rear tack. Increase your observation radius. If contact comes, it will likely come from elevated positions or from the side streets that feed into this main corridor. Copy. Command. David Gonzalez responded, accelerating slightly to close the distance between the rear vehicle and the central transport vehicle. The convoy moved through the warehouse district at a steady pace, neither so fast as to appear panicked nor so slow as to present an easy target. Maya found herself holding her breath unconsciously as they navigated the narrow street corridor between the towering buildings. Sunlight barely penetrated to street level, leaving the convoy in a perpetual twilight despite it being only mid-afternoon. The shadows seemed to deepen and multiply, creating optical illusions where every darkened window and recessed doorway became a potential threat. Rear tack. I'm seeing movement on the eastern roofline, approximately 150 meters ahead, Officer Thorne reported, his voice remaining steady despite the apparent threat. Possible hostile positioning. Maya's eyes snapped to the location Thorne had identified, and indeed, she could see what appeared to be human silhouettes moving across the roofline of the largest warehouse in the complex. It was subtle movement, but movement nonetheless. Someone was definitely positioning themselves on that elevated structure. Copy, Thorne, Kerrigan responded. All units, weapons hot. This is not a drill. Prepare for contact. Lead tack. Maintain forward progression, but be ready to provide suppressing fire if needed. The tension in the convoy ratcheted up noticeably. This was the moment they had trained for, the moment when the theoretical threat became a possible reality. Every operator's muscles tightened slightly, every sense heightened. Every weapon system moved from a ready state to an actively engaged state. But then, something unexpected happened. The silhouettes on the roofline withdrew back into the interior of the warehouse. The movement that Thorne had detected simply ceased. No shots were fired. No assault vehicles emerged from side streets. No explosive devices detonated beneath them. Movement ceased, Thorne reported, his tone reflecting confusion. The roofline is now clear. Visual confirmation of empty roofline. Possible false alarm or possible observation only. The convoy continued forward, but the atmosphere within the vehicles had fundamentally changed. They had encountered what appeared to be evidence of Dreskov's operatives. But the operatives had not engaged. They had merely observed and withdrawn. This created a new kind of psychological pressure, the knowledge that they were being monitored, evaluated, potentially being set up for something larger further down the route. Command. I'm reading this as reconnaissance. Officer Harley transmitted from the lead vehicle. Dreskov's people confirmed our position and convoy composition. They're probably reporting to command for coordination of the main ambush. Agreed, Kerrigan responded. All units, increase vigilance. They now know our exact composition and position. Prepare for coordinated assault within the next 2 kilometers. This is the real situation we trained for. The convoy pressed forward with renewed tension. The 3-mile stretch of warehouse district seemed to expand infinitely as they navigated through it. Maya continued her constant observation, looking for the telltale signs of coordinated assault preparation. She noticed subtle details that others might have missed. A cargo door on one of the warehouses closing just as they passed, suggesting occupancy within. A pickup truck parked across the street with its engine running, suggesting occupants inside. These small observations painted a picture of Dreskov's operatives positioning themselves throughout the district, waiting for the signal to attack. The convoy was perhaps halfway through the warehouse district when the radio crackled with urgent transmission from the lead vehicle. Contact! Contact! We have muzzle flashes from multiple rooftop positions. Incoming fire! Officer Hartley's voice carried the controlled urgency of someone trained to report under stress. All units return fire. Lead tack is taking evasive action. The first rounds impacted the lead vehicle, the sharp crack of rifle fire echoing through the urban canyon of the warehouse district. This was it. This was the moment that all the training had been designed to prepare them for. Rear tack. Engage rooftop positions to your right. Kerrigan commanded. Lead tack. Keep moving forward but provide suppressive fire. Command vehicle maintaining protective speed. All units, engage hostile targets. Officer Thorne immediately opened fire from the front passenger seat, his weapon targeting the roofline positions that had begun their assault. The sound of gunfire was deafening, the smell of burned powder filling the vehicle, the vibration of the weapon's recoil reverberating through Maya's entire body. Maya swung her tactical rifle toward the left side threats, identifying movement on a warehouse roofline approximately 80 meters away. A figure appeared at the edge of the roofline, and without hesitation, Maya engaged, firing 3 precise rounds that forced the figure to withdraw. She quickly identified another threat, this time at ground level near a warehouse loading dock, and engaged that position as well. The convoy continued forward, all 3 vehicles now providing suppressive fire in multiple directions simultaneously. The training they had undergone for 4 hours that very morning was now being applied under real-world conditions with actual lethal threats. The difference between simulation and reality became starkly apparent. The noise was louder, the heat of the weapons more intense, the psychological weight of knowing that mistakes could result in actual death infinitely more present. All units, maintain fire discipline, Kerrigan commanded. We are maintaining forward momentum toward the exit point. Do not allow them to slow our progression. The convoy accelerated slightly, moving faster through the warehouse district corridor while simultaneously maintaining defensive fire in multiple directions. The assault was coordinated but not overwhelming. Dreskov's operatives were firing from prepared positions but not attempting to close with the convoy. This suggested that Dreskov's plan was to slow them down, damage the vehicles, or force them into a static defensive position where they could be surrounded and overwhelmed. But Kerrigan's strategy was to maintain momentum, to refuse to be forced into static positions, to press forward toward the exit point where the terrain would open up and Dreskov's ability to position coordinated assault teams would decrease significantly. As they moved deeper through the district, Maya maintained her focus on observation and engagement. Her training had taught her to remain calm under stress, to process information rapidly, and to execute precise actions in response to threats. Even as rounds impacted their vehicle and the sound of gunfire continued to echo around them, she found herself operating with a clarity and focus that seemed almost separate from the chaos surrounding her. The lead vehicle suddenly lurched, struck by what appeared to be a concentrated volley of fire from a new position they hadn't yet identified. "Lead tack is hit," Officer Hartley transmitted, his voice strained but still controlled. "Vehicle integrity compromised. Still operational but sustaining damage." "Copy, lead tack," Kerrigan responded. "Maintain forward momentum. Exit point is 400 meters ahead. Rear tack, increase suppressive fire on the roofline positions behind us." The convoy continued forward, seemingly endless stretches of warehouses still surrounding them. But gradually, the structures began to thin slightly. The density of assault positions appeared to decrease as they moved toward the periphery of Dreskov's prepared ambush zone. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the assault fire ceased completely. The rooflines cleared. The ground-level firing positions emptied. The coordinated assault that had characterized the previous 5 minutes simply ended. "All units, maintain alert status," Kerrigan commanded. "But it appears the primary assault zone has been cleared. Continue forward with weapons ready. This may not be the end of contact." The convoy pressed forward, emerging from the warehouse district into more open terrain. The 3 vehicles, slightly damaged but still operational, rolled forward with their occupants breathing heavily, adrenaline still coursing through their systems, the reality of actual combat settling into their consciousness. They had survived the first coordinated assault. But whether this represented the end of Dreskov's planned attack or merely the first phase remained unclear. The 3-vehicle convoy emerged from the warehouse district into a transitional zone characterized by scattered industrial buildings and progressively more open terrain. Commander Kerrigan immediately issued orders for a tactical assessment halt, a decision that would prove critical to what was about to unfold. The convoy pulled into a secured perimeter near an abandoned automotive repair facility, with the lead and rear tactical vehicles positioning themselves for maximum defensive coverage while the central transport vehicle remained in the middle, protected by the surrounding tactical positions. All units. This is command. Kerrigan's voice came through the radio network with measured control. We are conducting a 5-minute tactical assessment. I want damage reports from all vehicles, ammunition counts, and personnel status. Rear TAC, maintain overwatch on the warehouse district. Lead TAC, cover our forward approach corridor. Nobody moves until we have a complete operational picture. Maya stepped out of the rear tactical vehicle for the first time since they had departed Riverside, her legs feeling slightly unsteady despite the adrenaline still coursing through her system. The acrid smell of burned powder clung to her clothes and hair. Her tactical vest bore scuff marks from near misses, rounds that had come close enough to create psychological impact even if they hadn't made direct contact with her body. Her hands were trembling slightly, not from fear but from the neurological aftermath of sustained high-stress engagement. Officer Thorne was conducting a rapid assessment of their vehicle's structural integrity, identifying 3 distinct impact points where hostile fire had struck. The windshield had been compromised on the passenger side, creating a spiderweb fracture pattern that still held together due to the laminated safety glass. One of the rear doors bore a visible scoring mark where a round had grazed the metal exterior. Vehicle is combat damaged but still operational, Thorne reported to Kerrigan as he approached their position. All critical systems remain functional. Hydraulics intact. Engine operational. We can continue forward, but I'd recommend reducing speed slightly to accommodate the compromised visibility on the passenger side. Kerrigan nodded, making mental notes. He turned his attention to David Gonzalez, who had exited the driver's seat and was walking the perimeter of the vehicle to assess damage from the driver's perspective. Rear TAC vehicle is operational with manageable damage, Gonzalez reported. We sustained impacts to the rear quarter panel and 1 round struck near the fuel access point, but there's no fuel leak or structural compromise affecting our operational capacity. The lead vehicle's assessment was slightly more concerning. Officer Hartley reported that their radiator had been struck, resulting in a slow coolant leak that would eventually compromise engine performance if they continued at sustained speed for extended distance. The vehicle would still function, but it had a finite operational window before the engine would begin to overheat. We can make it to the destination, Hartley reported, but we'll need to monitor engine temperature closely. If we run too hot for too long, we risk complete engine failure. Kerrigan processed this information, his tactical mind already adjusting plans based on the new constraints. They were still approximately 8 kilometers from their destination, a distance that would take roughly 15 to 20 minutes under normal driving conditions. The damaged lead vehicle could cover that distance, but just barely. All units, listen carefully. Kerrigan transmitted across the radio network. We have sustained damage to our convoy, but we remain combat effective. We are going to continue forward toward our destination. Lead TAC will maintain moderate speed to manage engine temperature. All tactical vehicles will maintain heightened alert status. We are now entering what I believe to be the transition zone between Dreskov's primary ambush positions and his secondary contingency positions. Be prepared for continued assault, but expect it to be of different character than what we just experienced. It was at this moment that Dr. Eleanor Harford's earlier words resonated in Maya's consciousness. She was standing near the perimeter of their secured position, observing the damage assessment, when she noticed something that others might have overlooked. There was a vehicle parked approximately 200 meters away, partially concealed behind a collapsed section of industrial scaffolding. The vehicle appeared to be occupied, based on the subtle movement she could detect from her vantage point. She immediately moved toward Kerrigan, who was still coordinating with his team leads. "Commander, visual on possible hostile observation point," Maya reported, keeping her voice low and her demeanor professional. "Vehicle, 200 meters southeast, partially concealed by the collapsed scaffolding near the old automotive facility. Appears to be occupied based on movement signatures." Kerrigan's eyes shifted to follow her indicated position. For a moment, his expression remained neutral, but then his tactical assessment kicked in. He raised his binoculars, examining the vehicle more closely. "Good observation, Reeves," he said after a moment. "That's Dreskov's command and control position. They're monitoring our progress, probably coordinating their follow-on assault positions." The fact that they're maintaining observation rather than immediately withdrawing suggests they still intend to engage us before we reach the destination. He turned to address the entire team, now assembled in the secured perimeter. Here's what's happening. Dreskov made his first move with the coordinated assault in the warehouse district. That was his primary attempt to stop us or force us into a defensive position where he could overwhelm us with numerical superiority. We successfully transited that position while maintaining our equipment asset and limiting friendly casualties. Now he's moving to contingency plan, what we call the follow-on engagement. Kerrigan pointed to their current position and then traced a line toward their destination on his tactical map. Between here and our destination, there are 3 possible secondary ambush positions where Dreskov could attempt to engage us again. He's probably not expecting us to be as combat effective as we've proven to be, which means his follow-on positions might not be as heavily resourced as his primary positions. But he'll still try to stop us, because allowing us to reach our destination unimpeded would constitute a complete failure of his operational objective. Commander Kerrigan gathered the team leads closer, lowering his voice to ensure that the observation team 200 meters away couldn't pick up their planning through visual surveillance alone. I'm implementing new tactical protocols for the approach to destination, Kerrigan explained. Lead TAC will continue forward at moderate speed to manage the engine temperature issue. Rear TAC will maintain closer proximity to the transport vehicle to provide immediate defensive support if needed. I'm rotating personnel assignments slightly to optimize our tactical response capability. He paused, making eye contact with each of his senior operators. Standard protocol would be to keep Reeves in her current position because of established firing line and sector assignments. But I'm reassigning her to lead TAC. We need our most technically proficient defensive operator in the most exposed vehicle. Lead TAC has sustained damage and will be moving slower than our other vehicles. If secondary assault comes, it's most likely to target the vehicle that's moving slowest and therefore presenting the easiest shooting platform. There was a moment of silence. Reassigning personnel mid-operation was unconventional, potentially risky, and suggested that Kerrigan had very specific tactical reasoning for the change. Officer Hartley, the driver of the lead vehicle, looked slightly skeptical but didn't voice objection. Richard Cole, who had been positioned in the lead vehicle's tactical turret position, opened his mouth as if to protest the reassignment, but Kerrigan's expression made clear that this was not a matter open to discussion. Reeves, you're moving to lead TAC immediately, Kerrigan commanded. Cole, you're moving back here to rear TAC. Get your equipment swapped out and let's move within 2 minutes. We need to maintain momentum. As Maya moved to gather her gear for the reassignment, Officer Cole approached her with an expression that suggested he wanted to voice some objection but was restraining himself. He had been skeptical of her presence on the team since her arrival at Riverside, but something in the past few minutes seemed to have shifted in his perspective. Whether it was her early identification of the observation vehicle or something else, Maya couldn't quite determine. You did good back there, Cole said quietly, almost grudgingly. During the assault, you were focused and you were accurate. Just wanted you to know that. Maya nodded, acknowledging the comment without overinterpreting it. Thanks. Be careful out here. We're not done yet. The personnel swap was completed within 90 seconds. Maya repositioned herself in the lead tactical vehicle, now in the position where Officer Cole had been. This position offered better forward observation and slightly more flexibility for defensive fire, but it also meant she would be in the vehicle most exposed to any secondary assault positions. Officer Richard Cole settled into the rear tactical vehicle position that Maya had just vacated, checking his ammunition count and surveying his new firing sectors with professional efficiency. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Kerrigan stood between the vehicles, addressing the assembled team one final time before they resumed forward movement. What we've experienced in the past 30 minutes is exactly what we trained for this morning. Coordinated assault, multiple firing positions, requirement for rapid decision-making under extreme stress. You all performed well. You all maintained discipline. And you all kept the asset secure while protecting each other's lives. He paused, his gravelly voice taking on a slightly different tone that conveyed something beyond standard military professionalism. But understand this, we are not out of danger. Dreskov is still out there. His organization is still committed to stopping us. And we still have 8 kilometers of hostile terrain between us and our destination. The next phase of this operation will likely be even more challenging than what we've already experienced, because Dreskov will be adapting to what he learned from his first engagement attempt. Kerrigan's gaze swept across each operator, lingering for just a moment longer on Maya than on the others. There was something in that extended eye contact that suggested he was reassessing her in real time, observing her performance during the actual combat engagement and making judgments about her future value to the team based on what he had witnessed. "Everyone back to your vehicles," Kerrigan commanded. "We maintain the new formation. Lead TAC moves forward at sustainable speed. Rear TAC maintains close support distance. Command vehicle remains centered. All personnel remain in tactical readiness mode. We don't celebrate until we've delivered the asset and we're back at Riverside." The convoy reformed, with Maya now positioned in the lead vehicle's tactical security position. She could see forward along the route they would be traveling, could see the transitional terrain giving way to increasingly open space punctuated by scattered industrial structures and commercial buildings. In the distance, perhaps 5 kilometers away, she could see the skyline of Port Harborview's downtown area, which was their destination. A secured facility controlled by their client that would provide protection for the equipment asset once they delivered it. But between their current position and that destination lay the psychological and tactical challenge that Kerrigan had articulated. Dreskov was not finished. His assault in the warehouse district had been his opening move, his attempt to end the situation through overwhelming force. That attempt had failed. But Dreskov, as a professional criminal operator, would have contingency plans. He would have secondary assault positions identified. He would have instructed his operatives to continue engaging the convoy through multiple phases, wearing them down through attrition and maintaining pressure until either the convoy was stopped or until it became clear that the convoy would successfully reach its destination. As the convoy resumed forward movement, Maya settled into the hypervigilance that characterized tactical operations in hostile territory. Her eyes continuously scanned the terrain ahead, looking for movement, for suspicious vehicle positioning, for the telltale signs that would indicate where Dreskov had positioned his secondary assault teams. The afternoon sun continued its descent toward the western horizon, creating longer shadows and progressively dimmer lighting conditions. This transition from day to evening would present its own tactical advantages and disadvantages. Better visibility for defenders at longer range. Progressively worse visibility for identifying threats at close range. The psychological weight of operating in dimming light, where fatigue becomes a factor and the psychological pressure of extended engagement begins to degrade even well-trained personnel's cognitive performance. Commander Kerrigan's words about the next phase being even more challenging seemed to hang in the air as the convoy pressed forward toward an uncertain confrontation that was surely still to come. The lead vehicle navigated through the transitional industrial landscape at a measured pace, maintaining the speed balance that allowed the damaged radiator to function adequately while still making forward progress toward their destination. Maya positioned herself in the tactical turret, her weapon system oriented toward potential threat vectors ahead and to the flanks. Officer Hartley maintained focused concentration on driving, constantly monitoring both the road conditions and the engine temperature gauge that had become their primary concern. Richard Cole, who had initially expressed skepticism about Maya's assignment to the lead vehicle, sat in the front passenger seat with his own tactical rifle ready, providing forward security observation and maintaining radio contact with the other vehicles in the convoy. "All units, this is command," Kerrigan's voice crackled through the radio network. "We are now in the primary-secondary engagement zone. Dreskov's intelligence analysis suggests he will attempt to force us into a defensive position using coordinated fire from elevated positions or through vehicular obstruction. Maintain alert status. Expect contact within the next 3 kilometers. The convoy had transited approximately 5 kilometers from their assessment halt, leaving them roughly 3 kilometers from their destination. The terrain had evolved from warehouse district to a mixed commercial and light industrial landscape, with occasional residential buildings creating a more complex battlefield geometry. The sun had descended to approximately 15 degrees above the horizon, creating long shadows that obscured certain areas and created uneven lighting conditions across the operational space. Maya's eyes constantly swept across the rooflines of the buildings they were passing, looking for telltale signs of occupied positions. She observed subtle indicators, a glint of light-off glass that might be a telescope or weapon sight, movement in a window that appeared too deliberate to be accidental, vehicles parked in positions that suggested occupancy despite the buildings being apparently abandoned. The convoy was passing through a commercial district characterized by older retail buildings interspersed with parking lots and small industrial workshops, when Officer Hartley's voice came through the radio with urgent but controlled transmission. "Lead TAC, I have visual on potential obstruction ahead," Hartley reported. "Approximately 200 meters forward. Appears to be a disabled vehicle positioned across the roadway. Requesting instructions." Kerrigan's response was immediate. "Do not approach the obstruction. This is likely an ambush setup. All units, prepare for coordinated assault. Lead TAC, initiate evasive maneuver. We will proceed around the obstruction using the service road to the right." Officer Hartley began to turn the lead vehicle toward the service road, but before the maneuver could be completed, the assault commenced. Muzzle flashes erupted from the rooflines of the buildings flanking the obstruction point, coordinated fire coming from at least 4 separate positions simultaneously. The disabled vehicle positioned across the roadway had indeed been a setup, designed to force them to slow down and cluster together in a compressed area where Dreskov's positioned assault teams could engage them from protected elevated positions. "Contact. Multiple rooftop positions," Maya transmitted as she immediately identified the assault sources and began returning fire toward the closest threat position. Her weapon erupted with controlled bursts, 3-round sequences that provided suppressive fire while maintaining ammunition discipline. The lead vehicle accelerated toward the service road, but the maneuver was complicated by the fact that the service road required crossing approximately 15 meters of open parking lot before they could reach the covered approach corridor. This created a temporary exposure window where the vehicle was not protected by any structures and was fully visible to Dreskov's assault positions. Rounds impacted the lead vehicle with increasing frequency. The windshield on the driver's side was struck and partially compromised, creating visibility challenges for Officer Hartley. The right side of the vehicle took multiple impacts, the metal body absorbing the kinetic energy of the incoming rounds and deforming under the stress. "Lead TAC has sustained additional damage," Cole reported urgently. "Windshield compromised on driver's side. Right side taking concentrated fire. Continue the maneuver," Kerrigan commanded. "Get to the service road and use the building for cover." Maya maintained her suppressive fire, identifying targets and engaging with precision despite the vehicle's movement and the psychological stress of sustained incoming fire. She identified a figure on a roofline approximately 80 meters to the northeast and engaged, her 3-round burst forcing the figure to withdraw from the firing position. She immediately shifted to another threat position, a window on the 2nd story of a commercial building to their left, and engaged that position as well. The lead vehicle lurched as it crossed the parking lot, Hartley pushing the damaged vehicle's acceleration to its maximum capability. The service road appeared ahead, offering the promise of protective structures and covered movement. But the transition to the service road required a sharp right turn that would temporarily place the vehicle's flank directly perpendicular to several of Dreskov's assault positions. Officer Cole continued his suppressive fire from the front passenger position, his weapon providing covering fire that allowed them to execute the maneuver. Behind them, the rear tactical vehicle was also engaging the assault positions, Officer Thorne's accurate fire from his position providing additional suppressive capability that began to degrade Dreskov's coordinated assault effectiveness. The lead vehicle made the sharp right turn onto the service road, and suddenly the threatening rooflines were no longer in direct line of sight. The building structures along the service corridor provided immediate protective cover, blocking the elevated firing positions from engaging them directly. The assault fire became sporadic and ineffective as Dreskov's operatives attempted to track the moving vehicle around the buildings without clear sightlines. "All units maintain forward momentum," Kerrigan transmitted. "Rear TAC and command vehicle, continue suppressive fire on the assault positions. Lead TAC, proceed along the service corridor toward the secondary route." The service road twisted around the buildings, and as the lead vehicle emerged from the immediate threat zone, the assault fire ceased to be a direct threat. However, it was clear that Dreskov had anticipated they might use the service corridor, because positioned ahead on the service road was a second vehicle, a large commercial truck that appeared to be deliberately positioned to block forward progress. Officer Hartley immediately recognized the obstruction and applied emergency braking, bringing the damaged vehicle to a rapid halt approximately 50 meters from the truck blockade. "Contact on the service road," Hartley reported. "Vehicle obstruction ahead. We're blocked. This is a secondary containment position." Kerrigan's voice carried urgency. Dreskov anticipated we might use the service corridor. "All units, prepare for coordinated withdrawal. Lead tack, you need to establish a defensive position and hold until we can extract you." Maya was already analyzing the tactical situation. They were now in a narrow service corridor with limited maneuverability options. The truck ahead blocked forward progress. The buildings on either side limited lateral movement. The only viable tactical option was to establish a defensive position within or behind the lead vehicle and prepare to hold until the convoy could reorganize to extract them. "I'm establishing a defensive position on the roof of the building to our left," Maya transmitted without waiting for explicit authorization. She was already moving toward the decision implementation, grabbing her tactical rifle and a spare ammunition magazine from her tactical vest. "Negative, Reeves," Kerrigan transmitted immediately. "Stay with the vehicle. We need." But Maya was already executing the movement. She had assessed the tactical situation and understood that their primary vehicle was vulnerable in the current position. An elevated defensive position would allow her to provide suppressive fire that could cover the vehicle while the rear units attempted to reorganize for extraction. She moved with practiced efficiency, using the side of their vehicle as a temporary shield, then moving toward the building adjacent to the service corridor. The building in question was a 3-story commercial structure with a fire escape on its external wall. Maya reached the fire escape and began climbing with urgency, her lighter weight allowing her to move quickly up the metal staircase. Behind her, Officer Cole was maintaining suppressive fire toward the rooflines where Dreskov's operatives were attempting to reposition to engage the newly established defensive point. Maya reached the roof level and immediately assessed the tactical environment. From this elevated position, she had clear sight lines to the truck blockade, to the service corridor where the lead vehicle was positioned, and to several of the roofline positions from which Dreskov's operatives had been engaging them. She moved to the edge of the roof, positioning herself behind a ventilation structure that offered both concealment and observation capability. From this elevated position, she could see movement around the truck blockade. There were at least 3 operatives positioned near and around the truck, clearly preparing to engage the lead vehicle directly. There were also operatives on the opposite rooflines, repositioning to take advantage of the momentary static nature of the lead vehicle's position. Maya made a rapid threat assessment and began engaging the closest threats. Her first 3-round burst targeted the operatives' position nearest to the truck blockade. The rounds struck near their position with sufficient accuracy to force them to seek cover and abandon their immediate assault preparations. "Roof position established," Maya transmitted to Kerrigan. "I have visual on the blockade area and roofline positions. Initiating suppressive fire to cover the lead vehicle." From her elevated vantage point, Maya could now see the broader tactical picture. The rear tactical vehicle and command vehicle had completed the parking lot transition and were moving toward the service corridor, but they were encountering resistance from assault positions that were still engaging them. The service corridor itself was becoming a contested space where Dreskov's operatives were attempting to prevent the rear vehicles from reaching the lead vehicle position. Officer Hartley, recognizing the vulnerability of his vehicle and the tactical value of Maya's elevated position, transmitted urgent guidance. "Rear tack, move to contact with lead tack position. Lead tack is establishing defensive position. Maya has roof superiority. Push forward and link up with us." The command structure that Maya had questioned at the briefing stage was now being tested in real-world conditions. Commander Kerrigan, monitoring the situation from the command vehicle, was processing multiple information streams simultaneously: the position of all 3 vehicles, the location of hostile assault positions, the current ammunition and fuel status of his operatives, and the tactical feasibility of various extraction options. From her roof position, Maya could see the rear tactical vehicle attempting to navigate the parking lot and access the service corridor. Officer Thorne was providing aggressive suppressive fire from his position, targeting the roof lines that were attempting to engage the rear vehicle. The command vehicle was maintaining a protected distance, staying positioned where it could provide supporting fire while still maintaining flexibility to execute contingency maneuvers if needed. The tactical situation had evolved from the coordinated assault phase into what military terminology defined as the dynamic engagement phase, a situation where multiple elements were maneuvering and engaging simultaneously, where the outcome was determined not by initial force composition but by the effectiveness of real-time decision-making and individual operator competence. Maya engaged another threat position, forcing an operative to abandon his firing position and seek cover. She identified a roofline position approximately 120 meters to her right that had a clear sight line to the service corridor, and she engaged that position with precision fire that forced the occupants to retreat from the exposed roofline. The rear tactical vehicle successfully navigated the parking lot and entered the service corridor, moving toward the lead vehicle's position. The combined suppressive fire from Officer Thorne, Officer Cole, and Maya's elevated position began to overwhelm Dreskov's ability to maintain coordinated assault fire. The assault positions that had been so effectively coordinated in the warehouse district were now being disrupted by tactical responses that focused on suppressive fire and maneuverability rather than defensive clustering. All units, this is command, Kerrigan transmitted with measured control despite the ongoing assault. We are consolidating at the lead TAC position. Establish overlapping fields of fire. Prepare for potential assault from the truck blockade area. Maya, maintain your roof position. Everyone else, prepare for close quarters engagement. This blockade situation is forcing Dreskov's people to fight us on our terms rather than their prepared positions. The lead and rear tactical vehicles linked up in the service corridor, with the command vehicle providing supporting fire from its position. The truck blockade ahead remained a physical barrier, but without clear sight lines to engage the consolidated vehicle positions, Dreskov's operatives were losing their tactical advantage. Maya continued her elevated suppressive fire, focusing on any movement that appeared to be preparatory for assault toward the consolidated vehicle position. The late afternoon was transitioning toward early evening, and the quality of light was degrading progressively, which would eventually favor defensive positions over attacking positions. The tactical situation had reached a critical juncture where the outcome would be determined by the next series of decisions and movements from both sides. The consolidated vehicle position in the service corridor had held for approximately 4 minutes, a time frame that felt simultaneously compressed and extended when experienced under sustained combat stress. Maya maintained her elevated position on the 3-story commercial building's roofline, her tactical rifle ready for any hostile movement that would suggest a resumption of aggressive assault. The suppressive fire from the vehicle positions had degraded to periodic shots intended to maintain threat presence rather than active engagement, as Dreskov's operatives seemed to be regrouping or reassessing their tactical approach. Commander Kerrigan's voice came through the radio network with measured authority. All units, I'm reading this as a tactical pause. Dreskov is reorganizing his assault approach. We need to assume he's preparing a final coordinated push before he accepts that this operation has failed. Everyone check ammunition, check medical status, and prepare for maximum intensity engagement. We are approximately 2 kilometers from our destination. If we can break through this containment, we can reach secured territory. Officer Cole, positioned in the front passenger seat of the lead vehicle, transmitted an urgent situation report. We've sustained substantial damage to the lead vehicle. Engine temperature is approaching critical threshold. If we don't get moving soon, we risk engine seizure. We need to execute a movement maneuver now while we still have vehicular mobility. Kerrigan processed this critical information. The lead vehicle's mechanical vulnerability had just become an immediate operational constraint. They could not remain in static position indefinitely. They needed to either move forward, execute a breakthrough maneuver, or abandon the vehicle and attempt tactical withdrawal on foot, an option that would be catastrophic given the quantity of hostile forces still positioned around them. Command, I have situation development. Maya transmitted from her elevated position. She had identified something that the operators in the vehicles couldn't see from their limited vantage points. Movement around the truck blockade. Multiple operatives, approximately 8 to 10 individuals, are positioning equipment near the truck. It appears to be heavy weaponry, possibly a mounted machine gun or similar crew-served weapon. They're preparing for escalated engagement. The tactical situation had just shifted dramatically. If Dreskov's operatives were deploying crew-served weapons like machine guns, the dynamic of the engagement would change fundamentally. A vehicle under fire from crew-served weapons would be shredded within seconds, the passengers inside rendered indefensible by the volume and intensity of fire that such weapons could generate. Confirm visual on crew-served weapons, Kerrigan transmitted, his voice carrying the barely contained urgency of someone recognizing a catastrophic threat development. Affirmative, Maya confirmed. I have clear visual. They are definitely establishing a heavy weapon position. Appears to be an M240 machine gun or equivalent. They're setting up on a tripod mount positioned approximately 30 meters behind the truck blockade, providing clear sight lines to the service corridor and our vehicle positions. The implications were immediately clear to every operator. If Dreskov deployed a mounted machine gun against their vehicles, the armor plating and protective features of the tactical vehicles would prove insufficient against sustained fire from such a weapon. Within minutes, possibly seconds after the weapon opened fire, the vehicles would be catastrophically damaged and the personnel inside would be either killed or severely wounded. All units, I'm implementing emergency response protocol, Kerrigan transmitted with decisive authority. Lead TAC, you're going to execute a breakthrough maneuver. You will accelerate toward the truck blockade at maximum speed. You will use your vehicle as a battering ram to push through the blockade. Rear TAC will provide maximum suppressive fire to cover your movement. Maya, I need you to engage the heavy weapon position immediately. Prevent them from deploying that weapon at all costs. The orders were clear but carried enormous risk. The lead vehicle, already damaged and struggling with overheating, would be pushed to its maximum capability. The rear vehicle would provide covering fire but would be exposed to return fire while doing so. And Maya, from her roof position, would need to engage operatives who were actively attempting to deploy a crew-served weapon, an engagement that required precision under extreme pressure. Maya didn't hesitate. She shifted her tactical rifle to the heavy weapon position, identifying the operatives who were working to finalize the mounting and loading of the machine gun. She assessed the range at approximately 150 meters, well within her effective engagement distance. She identified her target, the lead operative, the one who appeared to be directing the setup of the weapon. Her first shot was deliberately aimed to force maximum disruption. The round struck the ammunition belt feed mechanism of the machine gun, causing the weapon to become inoperable even if the operatives attempted to return fire. The operatives scrambled to respond to the threat, attempting to identify where the fire was coming from. Maya's second engagement targeted the operative directing the setup. Her 3-round burst forced him to abandon his position and seek cover, disrupting the coordination necessary to deploy the heavy weapon effectively. Heavy weapon position is degraded, Maya transmitted. They're attempting to recover, but the weapon isn't fully operational. Recommend immediate breakthrough maneuver. All units, execute breakthrough, Kerrigan commanded. Lead TAC, go now. Officer Hartley pushed the damaged lead vehicle's accelerator to its absolute maximum, the engine roaring in protest as it was driven beyond its safe operational parameters. The vehicle lurched forward, building speed in the narrow service corridor. Cole maintained suppressive fire from the front passenger position, targeting threats that could potentially interfere with the vehicle's movement. Behind them, Officer Thorne and the rear vehicle initiated massive suppressive fire toward the roofline positions and the heavy weapon position, pouring rounds downrange with deliberate intensity to suppress enemy return fire during the critical breakthrough maneuver window. The lead vehicle accelerated toward the truck blockade, the distance closing with each passing second. 50 meters. 40 meters, 30 meters. The operatives around the truck blockade recognized the threat and scrambled to move clear of the impact zone, understanding that the vehicle was going to make contact with the truck regardless of what they did to stop it. At approximately 20 meters from impact, the lead vehicle's radiator system finally failed catastrophically. The damaged cooling system, already compromised from the warehouse district assault, finally gave way under the extreme stress of maximum acceleration. Steam erupted from beneath the hood, and the engine began to seize, losing power and forward momentum simultaneously. Officer Hartley recognized the mechanical failure immediately. He was no longer in control of a fully operational vehicle. Instead, he was piloting a machine that was losing power at the worst possible moment in the breakthrough maneuver. Lead tack engine failure. Cole transmitted urgently. We're losing power. We're not going to reach the blockade. The vehicle's momentum carried it forward another 10 meters despite the failed engine, the mass and speed allowing continued movement even as the drivetrain ceased to function. The lead vehicle struck the truck blockade at reduced speed, the collision still violent enough to create a barrier breach but not sufficient to push through completely. The impact brought the lead vehicle to a complete stop, now firmly lodged against the truck blockade, with Maya's building roof position providing the only defensive advantage the convoy possessed. Lead tack is stopped against the blockade, Cole reported, his voice reflecting the critical nature of their position. Engine is completely dead. We're out of vehicular mobility. The tactical situation had just become exponentially more dangerous. The lead vehicle was now immobilized, positioned directly against the blockade, and surrounded by hostile forces that could reorganize for assault now that the breakthrough maneuver had failed. All units, prepare for dismounted engagement, Kerrigan transmitted with urgency. Lead tack, you need to exit the vehicle and establish defensive positions on foot. Use the truck blockade for cover. Rear tack, move your vehicle to provide fire support from a protected position. Maintain suppressive fire on all hostile positions. Officer Hartley and Richard Cole exited the lead vehicle, weapons ready, moving with practiced urgency toward the truck blockade where they established defensive positions. The truck itself provided limited cover, but it was better than remaining inside a vehicle that could no longer maneuver. From her roof position, Maya could see the full scope of what was developing. The tactical situation had degraded from a vehicle-based engagement to a dismounted firefight. Dreskov's operatives, recognizing that the lead vehicle was now immobilized and that ground-based engagement was now the primary mode of combat, began repositioning their assault elements toward ground-level engagement. Maya identified multiple operatives beginning to move down from roof lines and elevated positions, transitioning toward ground-level assault formations. They were moving with tactical discipline, using building structures for cover and concealment, clearly attempting to execute a coordinated ground assault that would overwhelm the dismounted personnel at the truck blockade. Multiple operatives transitioning to ground-level assault, Maya reported, engaging the closest threat elements to disrupt their movement. They're organizing for coordinated ground assault, estimating 8 to 10 assault operatives moving toward your position. Officer Hartley and Cole had established initial defensive positions at the truck blockade, but they were now facing a fundamentally different tactical problem. They were two personnel defending a position against what appeared to be organized ground assault from multiple directions simultaneously. Rear tack, move forward to provide fire support, Kerrigan commanded. David, get your vehicle as close to the blockade position as possible. Provide covering fire for Hartley and Cole. Officer David Gonzalez maneuvered the rear vehicle forward through the service corridor, positioning it to provide maximum supporting fire toward the ground-level assault positions that were developing. Officer Thorne maintained aggressive suppressive fire from his position, targeting operatives who were attempting to organize the assault. But the situation was still critical. 2 personnel at the blockade with supporting fire from one vehicle against 8 to 10 assault operatives who were themselves receiving supporting fire from roofline positions. It was a tactically disadvantaged situation, and everyone recognized it. Maya made a tactical decision that would prove to be the pivotal moment of the entire engagement. She abandoned her roof position, moving rapidly toward the fire escape with the explicit intention of reaching ground level and establishing a third defensive element that could provide immediate support to Hartley and Cole. She descended the fire escape with dangerous speed, taking 3 and 4 steps at a time, moving with urgency that bordered on recklessness. She hit the ground level at a full run, moving toward the service corridor where the blockade position was located. "Where are you going?" Cole transmitted, seeing her moving toward their position. "Incoming support," Maya responded, her breathing heavy from the exertion. I'm coming to your position to establish a third defensive element. She reached the truck blockade position and immediately established a firing position on the opposite flank from where Cole was positioned. From her new ground-level vantage point, she could now see the assault operatives approaching from different angles, and she could engage them with direct fire that was far more devastating than her suppressive fire from the roof had been. The assault operatives were now facing return fire from 3 locations simultaneously: the rear vehicle providing fire support, Cole's position at the blockade, and Maya's newly established position providing flank protection. The coordinated nature of the defensive response was degrading the tactical effectiveness of Dreskov's assault. Dreskov's lead assault element attempted to close with Cole's position, 3 operatives moving with tactical coordination toward his defensive location. But as they moved into Maya's field of fire, she engaged with precision, her 3-round bursts forcing the assault operatives to abandon their movement and seek cover. Another assault element attempted to move around the opposite flank of the blockade position, clearly trying to execute a classic tactical encirclement maneuver. But the presence of 3 defensive positions meant that no flank was truly undefended. Officer Thorne's suppressive fire from the rear vehicle forced this assault element to cease their movement and establish defensive positions of their own. The ground-level assault that Dreskov had attempted was degrading in real time. What had appeared to be an overwhelming assault force organized enough to destroy the dismounted defenders was now reduced to a series of isolated elements, each attempting to maintain defensive positions against coordinated return fire. But the assault wasn't over. Dreskov's operatives, recognizing that their direct assault approach was failing, began attempting to utilize the heavy machine gun position to provide suppressive fire. The operatives who had been establishing the weapon earlier renewed their efforts, attempting to get the damaged machine gun operational or to establish an alternative heavy weapon position. Maya, recognizing this threat development, immediately shifted her attention back toward the heavy weapon area. She engaged with precision fire, targeting the operatives who were attempting to complete the heavy weapon setup. Her fire forced them to abandon the attempt once again, but she understood that they would continue attempting to establish this weapon unless she could prevent it permanently. The tactical situation at the blockade position had stabilized into a dynamic equilibrium. Neither side could achieve complete dominance, but neither side was willing to break contact and withdraw. The outcome would be determined by which side exhausted their ammunition, their psychological endurance, or their tactical options first. The tactical engagement at the truck blockade had reached a critical point of transition where the immediate threat of assault was being replaced by a different kind of pressure, the pressure of attrition, the slow grinding down of combat effectiveness through sustained engagement. The gunfire that had characterized the previous 15 minutes of intense firefight was now sporadic and defensive rather than offensive, with both sides maintaining suppressive fire while attempting to preserve ammunition and assess their operational situation. Commander Kerrigan, monitoring the situation from the command vehicle positioned 100 meters back from the blockade, made a tactical assessment that the immediate assault phase was concluding. Dreskov's operatives had abandoned their coordinated ground assault attempt after sustaining casualties that were visible even from a distance. 3 bodies lay in the open areas between the assault positions and the blockade. Several others were clearly wounded, their movements restricted and their combat effectiveness degraded. "All units, this is command," Kerrigan transmitted with measured authority. "Assess the tactical situation. We have degraded Dreskov's assault capability, but we are still contained at the blockade position. Ammunition status reports from all positions." Officer Hartley, still maintaining his position at the truck blockade, transmitted first. "Lead TAC position ammunition status, approximately 40% remaining. We've sustained engagement and ammunition consumption has been heavy. Cole is at similar status." Officer Thorne from the rear vehicle reported next. "Rear TAC ammunition status, approximately 50%. We've been providing suppressive fire continuously, but we still have adequate reserves for extended engagement if needed." Maya, maintaining her position with her tactical rifle oriented toward the assault positions, reported her status. "Ground position ammunition status, approximately 60%. I've been selective with engagement to preserve ammunition while maintaining suppressive capability." Kerrigan processed this information quickly. They had adequate ammunition for continued defense, but not for indefinite engagement. The lead vehicle was completely immobilized, which meant they couldn't execute forward breakthrough maneuvers. The rear vehicle could still maneuver, but doing so would abandon the dismounted personnel at the blockade to face hostile fire without vehicle-based support. Command, I'm reading this as a stalled tactical situation, Officer Thorne transmitted. Dreskov's assault has been disrupted, but we're still contained. We can hold this position indefinitely if ammunition holds, but we can't break through to reach our destination. What's the command guidance? Before Kerrigan could respond, something unexpected occurred. The radio frequency crackled with a transmission that didn't originate from any of the Alpha Unit members. The voice was heavily accented, calm, and carried the measured tone of someone confident in their position. Reeves, Hartley, Gonzalez, this is Victor Dreskov. The voice transmitted across the radio frequency in a way that suggested he had been monitoring their communications. I have approximately 12 combat-effective operatives surrounding your position. You are immobilized. You are contained. Your situation is untenable. I am offering you a single opportunity for negotiation. Commander Kerrigan immediately transmitted across the internal network. All units, do not respond to hostile communications. Maintain radio discipline. This is a psychological operation attempt. But Dreskov continued his transmission without waiting for response. I do not require the equipment package. What I require is acknowledgement that Port Harborview belongs under my operational control. If you abandon the equipment at this location and withdraw, I will permit you to leave. If you attempt to continue forward, I will destroy your vehicles and your personnel. This is not a threat. This is a statement of fact based on the military resources I have positioned around you. Maya understood immediately what Dreskov was attempting. He had suffered a tactical defeat. His assault had failed. His operatives had sustained casualties, and his ability to prevent the convoy from eventually reaching their destination was degrading. But he was attempting to convert tactical failure into psychological victory by forcing them to abandon their mission, which would constitute a symbolic defeat that would undermine their operational credibility in Port Harborview's criminal underworld. Command, that's a psychological operation, Officer Cole transmitted from the blockade position. He's trying to force us to abandon the mission because he can't stop us militarily. We should ignore the offer and prepare to continue forward once we can get the lead vehicle operational or establish alternative transport. Kerrigan processed this assessment. Cole was correct in his interpretation of Dreskov's intent. But the situation was more complex than simple tactical mathematics. They had sustained significant vehicle damage. The lead vehicle was completely immobilized. They had limited ammunition, and they were facing an opponent who clearly had extensive resources and professional military expertise directing his operations. All units, maintain position, Kerrigan commanded. Dreskov, I'm responding to your transmission. I am Commander David Kerrigan, Alpha Tactical Unit, Riverside Security Operations. We will not abandon our mission. We will not negotiate the terms of our operational commitment. I am giving you one opportunity to withdraw your forces and permit us to complete our transit. If you continue this engagement, I will be forced to employ escalated response protocols. It was a calculated bluff, a statement designed to suggest that Kerrigan had additional resources or capabilities that he wasn't currently employing. In reality, the Alpha Unit had reached the limits of their immediate tactical capability without external support. Dreskov's response came through the radio after a brief pause. Commander Kerrigan, I respect your commitment to your mission, but you are operating in territory where I control the tactical environment. I have military specialists advising my operations. I have positioned forces with superior numbers. You cannot win this engagement. You can only delay the inevitable. My final offer, you have 5 minutes to abandon the equipment package and withdraw. After 5 minutes, I will initiate assault with crew-served weapons and overwhelming force. You will die if you do not accept this offer. The transmission ended, and the radio frequency fell silent. Kerrigan looked toward the blockade position, knowing that the next decisions would determine whether this operation succeeded or failed, whether his personnel lived or died. All units, listen to me, Kerrigan transmitted with quiet intensity. We are in a critical decision point. I need to understand our full tactical picture. Lead tack. Can the vehicle be repaired or recovered? Officer Hartley responded after a brief assessment. Negative, command. The radiator system is completely destroyed. The engine is seized. This vehicle is not operational. We would need significant mechanical work and spare parts to restore it to operational status. We don't have that capability or time. Understood, Kerrigan replied. What about the equipment package? How critical is it that we deliver the actual asset versus being able to confirm its location and status? There was a pause as Kerrigan was clearly processing alternative courses of action. The client contract required delivery of the equipment to the secured destination facility, but there might be flexibility in the exact nature of the delivery if the equipment could be protected and its location secured. Command, I may have a tactical option, Officer Thorne transmitted from the rear vehicle. If we can get a personnel transport vehicle closer to the blockade position, we might be able to extract the core equipment components and move them toward the destination separately while the main convoy creates a defensive distraction here. It was a complex tactical maneuver that carried significant risk. The plan would involve splitting the unit into multiple elements, reducing their concentrated defensive capability at any single location. But it also offered the possibility of success where a direct breakthrough maneuver appeared impossible. Proceed with that plan, Kerrigan commanded. I'm contacting Riverside for emergency extraction support. We need additional personnel and vehicles to execute this operation effectively. Maya understood immediately what was being planned. She would remain at the blockade position with Hartley and Cole, maintaining the defensive perimeter and providing covering fire while the command vehicle and rear vehicle would execute a tactical withdrawal, extracting the equipment package and moving toward the destination with additional tactical options. All units, here is the plan, Kerrigan transmitted. Lead tack remains at the blockade, maintains defensive position and pins down Dreskov's forces through continued engagement. Rear tack and command vehicle execute tactical withdrawal, extract the equipment package, and move toward the destination via alternative route. We will link up with additional personnel and vehicles being dispatched from Riverside for final push to destination. Officer Cole transmitted immediate concern. Command, we can hold this position, but we're only 2 personnel plus Maya operating alone. Dreskov has stated he has 12 combat-effective operatives. Our defensive perimeter is vulnerable. Understood, Kerrigan replied. But Maya's presence creates a tactical multiplier effect. She has been operating effectively in multiple roles simultaneously: elevated suppressive fire, ground-level assault disruption, and tactical flexibility. She can cover multiple sectors that would normally require more personnel. You will maintain discipline, preserve ammunition, and hold until we can extract you or provide reinforcement. The decision had been made. Maya, Officer Hartley, and Officer Cole would remain at the blockade position, defending against Dreskov's forces while the remainder of the convoy executed a tactical withdrawal and attempted to deliver the equipment package through alternative means. Kerrigan initiated the tactical withdrawal sequence, the command vehicle and rear vehicle beginning a careful backward movement, maintaining suppressive fire on the assault positions while simultaneously extracting themselves from the blockade area. Dreskov's operatives, recognizing the movement, attempted to assault the withdrawing vehicles. But the suppressive fire from Maya, Hartley, and Cole's positions at the blockade degraded the assault effectiveness. The operatives who attempted to move toward the withdrawing vehicles found themselves under intense fire from multiple directions. Within approximately 2 minutes, the command vehicle and rear vehicle had successfully extracted themselves from the immediate blockade area and were moving toward an alternate route that would bypass the containment position entirely. Maya watched them depart, understanding the tactical reality that she had just become the most exposed element of the entire operation. She was now one of only 3 personnel at a static defensive position, facing an enemy force that numbered in the dozens, with no immediate extraction capability and no reinforcement arriving for at least another 10 to 15 minutes, the estimated travel time for additional Riverside personnel to reach their position. Lead tack, command vehicle is moving toward extraction point, Officer Thorne transmitted from the rear vehicle as it withdrew. "We are initiating tactical withdrawal to alternate route. Maintain defensive position. Reinforcement will arrive within 15 minutes. Do not allow Dreskov to compress your perimeter." "Copy that," Officer Hartley acknowledged. "We're going to hold this position. Prepare for potential assault intensification once Dreskov recognizes that the main convoy has withdrawn." Indeed, that was precisely what occurred. Within moments of the command vehicle and rear vehicle disappearing from Dreskov's immediate operational view, the assault fire from his positions intensified dramatically. The operatives, now freed from the pressure of defending multiple flanks against a more dispersed target, began focusing their concentrated fire toward the blockade position where Maya, Hartley, and Cole were maintaining their defensive stance. Maya engaged the closest assault threats, her weapon erupting with controlled fire that forced advancing operatives to seek cover. But she was acutely aware of the reality of their situation. They were 3 personnel defending a static position against a numerically superior force that was increasingly aggressive as the tactical situation evolved. The next 10 to 15 minutes would determine whether they could hold the position until reinforcement arrived, or whether Dreskov's persistent pressure would eventually overwhelm their defensive capability through sheer force of numbers and attrition. The blockade position had become a high-intensity combat zone as Dreskov's operatives, freed from the pressure of defending against the multi-directional threat posed by the full convoy, began concentrating overwhelming fire toward the 3 defenders. The assault fire was now coming from at least 8 distinct positions simultaneously, creating a crossfire situation that would have been catastrophic for less trained personnel. But Officer Hartley, Officer Cole, and Maya Reeves had years of tactical training and combat experience that allowed them to maintain discipline and execute coordinated defensive responses despite the psychological pressure. Officer Hartley had repositioned himself behind the truck blockade's engine compartment, a position that provided substantial protective cover against incoming fire. His tactical rifle fired methodical shots toward roofline positions, each shot carefully aimed to maximize suppressive effect while preserving ammunition. Officer Cole had taken position on the opposite side of the blockade, providing fire toward ground-level assault elements that were attempting to advance through the service corridor toward their position. Maya maintained a mobile posture, moving between different firing positions around the blockade area, utilizing her smaller size and greater agility to shift between cover points more rapidly than her larger teammates could manage. This tactical flexibility allowed her to engage threats from multiple angles, creating the illusion of a larger defensive force while simultaneously reducing the effectiveness of any single assault vector against her position. The firefight had been sustained for approximately 8 minutes since the command and rear vehicles had withdrawn, and the ammunition situation was becoming increasingly critical. Officer Hartley's ammunition count was now dangerously low, with perhaps only 2 magazines remaining in his tactical vest. Officer Cole was at similar status, his sustained suppressive fire having consumed his ammunition reserves rapidly. "Ammunition status check," Officer Hartley transmitted across the unit frequency. "Cole is at critical levels. I'm at critical levels. Maya, what's your status?" Maya conducted a rapid assessment of her remaining ammunition. "I have approximately 25% remaining, maybe 3 full magazines and a partial. If we maintain selective fire discipline, I can continue defensive operations for another 5 to 10 minutes at current engagement intensity." It was a sobering assessment. 3 personnel at a blockade position with critically low ammunition, facing assault from multiple directions, with reinforcement estimated to arrive in approximately 7 to 8 minutes. The tactical mathematics were unfavorable, and everyone understood it. "Command, this is lead tac," Officer Hartley transmitted toward Kerrigan's position. "We are approaching ammunition critical status. Recommend accelerated reinforcement timeline if possible." Kerrigan's response came through with urgency. "Copy lead tac. Riverside is diverting emergency response team. They are approximately 8 minutes out. Maintain position. Hold defensive perimeter. Do not allow Dreskov to compress your position." The assault fire intensified further as Dreskov's operatives, recognizing that the main convoy had completely withdrawn and that they were facing only a small defensive element, began coordinating a final push designed to overwhelm the blockade position through concentrated assault. Maya identified at least 5 operatives beginning to move in coordinated fashion toward the blockade from a flanking approach, clearly attempting to execute a tactical envelopment maneuver that would allow them to attack the blockade from multiple angles simultaneously. Assault formation developing. Maya transmitted urgently. 5 operatives, coordinated movement, attempting flanking maneuver from the eastern approach corridor. She immediately shifted her position to address this threat, moving toward a vantage point where she could engage the flanking assault element. The movement required her to temporarily expose herself to fire from roofline positions, but the tactical necessity of disrupting the coordinated assault outweighed the personal risk. Officer Cole recognized her tactical movement and provided immediate suppressive fire toward the roofline positions, creating cover fire that allowed Maya to shift position without sustaining direct hits. The coordination between the 3 defenders was becoming increasingly evident. They were operating as a unified tactical element despite the stress and danger of their situation. Maya engaged the flanking assault element with precision fire, her 3-round bursts targeting the lead operatives and forcing them to seek cover and abandon their coordinated movement. The tactical envelopment maneuver that Dreskov's forces had initiated was disrupted before it could fully develop, buying additional time and maintaining the integrity of their defensive perimeter. But the assault continued with unabated intensity. More operatives moved to replace those who had been forced to seek cover. Ground-level assaults were attempted from multiple directions. Roofline fire continued to suppress their defensive positions, limiting their ability to maneuver and restricting their fields of fire. Officer Hartley's weapon suddenly fell silent. He had expended his final rounds and was now out of ammunition. He immediately began to reload from Cole's spare ammunition, a process that temporarily reduced the number of active defensive positions from 3 to 2. "Hartley is reloading," Cole transmitted. "Maya, you're our primary fire support. Make your shots count." Maya understood the tactical situation completely. She was now the primary defensive element, with Hartley reloading and Cole maintaining a secondary suppressive position. If Dreskov's operatives coordinated a major assault during the reload window, the blockade position would be extremely vulnerable. The assault came within seconds. At least 6 operatives moved simultaneously from multiple approach vectors, clearly coordinating their movement with tactical precision. They were moving with the understanding that the blockade position was at its moment of maximum vulnerability. Maya engaged the closest assault elements with deliberate, accurate fire. Each round found its target with precision that suggested extensive training and exceptional weapon handling capability. The lead assaulting operatives were forced to cease their forward movement and establish defensive positions, unable to advance against her suppressive fire. But more operatives were pressing forward, attempting to use the chaos of the assault to close the distance to the blockade. Maya could feel the pressure increasing, the ammunition in her final magazine decreasing with each shot, the tactical window closing as Dreskov's forces pressed their numerical advantage. Officer Hartley completed his reload and immediately resumed fire, his reloaded magazines allowing him to establish firing positions that provided overlapping coverage with Maya's field of fire. The sudden resumption of fire from his position forced the assaulting operatives to shift their tactical approach, preventing them from achieving the breakthrough they had been attempting. Then, suddenly, the tactical situation shifted again. The sound of additional gunfire came from an unexpected direction, behind the assault positions, away from the blockade. The gunfire was coming from the service corridor approach route, and it was engaging Dreskov's assault forces from their rear flank. Officer Thorne's voice came through the radio with urgent transmission. "Lead TAC, this is rear TAC. Emergency response team from Riverside has arrived. They are engaging Dreskov's assault positions from the rear. Maintain your defensive position. We are creating a tactical envelopment." The arrival of the Riverside Emergency Response Team dramatically shifted the balance of the engagement. What had been a numerical advantage for Dreskov's forces suddenly transformed into a tactical vulnerability. The assault operatives who had been pressing forward against the blockade position now found themselves receiving fire from behind their own positions, forcing them to either retreat or attempt to engage the newly arrived threat. Dreskov's operatives, faced with tactical envelopment and incoming fire from multiple directions, began to break formation. The coordinated assault effort that had been so carefully organized dissolved into individual elements attempting to extract themselves from the increasingly untenable tactical situation. The emergency response team from Riverside, consisting of 8 additional trained operators, rapidly consolidated their positions and began pushing forward to relieve the blockade defenders. Officer Thorne, who had guided them through the approach corridor, was now engaging assault elements with methodical precision, providing additional suppressive fire that accelerated Dreskov's tactical retreat. Within approximately 3 minutes, the assault had been completely disrupted. Dreskov's operatives were in full retreat, abandoning their prepared positions and fleeing the engagement area. Some were moving toward vehicles parked in strategic locations throughout the service corridor complex. Others were simply abandoning equipment and weapons in their haste to extract themselves from the engagement. Officer Hartley, recognizing that the immediate assault threat had been eliminated, transmitted a status report to the emergency response team leader. Lead TAC position is secure. We have sustained engagement but maintained position. 3 personnel holding blockade, ammunition approaching critical status. We are ready for tactical coordination with emergency response team. The emergency response team leader, identified as Captain Thomas Whitmore, quickly consolidated his forces and established a unified defensive perimeter that integrated with the blockade position defenders. The additional firepower and fresh personnel were immediately visible in the tactical response capability of the consolidated position. Within minutes, the sound of additional vehicles approaching from the service corridor became audible. The command vehicle and rear tactical vehicle were returning, having completed their withdrawal and extraction of the equipment package. They had successfully moved the core components of the $4.2 million asset away from the blockade area and had established it in a temporary secure location with additional personnel. Commander Kerrigan's voice came through the radio as his vehicle approached the blockade position. All units, this is command. Emergency response team has secured the area. Dreskov's assault forces are in retreat. Tactical situation is now under control. Lead TAC position has successfully held against numerically superior assault. Prepare for tactical consolidation and final push to destination. As the vehicles consolidated and the personnel began conducting rapid damage assessment and tactical reorganization, the reality of what had occurred was settling into everyone's consciousness. The blockade position had been defended against sustained assault by a numerically superior force. The equipment asset had been successfully evacuated despite overwhelming enemy pressure. The convoy, though damaged and exhausted, remained operationally capable of completing their mission. Officer Hartley approached Maya as she was conducting a rapid weapons check and ammunition inventory. His expression carried a complexity of emotions: relief that the assault had been repelled, respect for her tactical performance, and perhaps a degree of recalibration regarding his previous skepticism about her presence on the team. "That was exceptional work at that blockade position," Hartley said with quiet sincerity. "You maintained fire discipline, provided suppressive coverage for multiple engagement vectors, and adapted to changing tactical situations in real time. That's textbook defensive tactics." Officer Cole joined them, his own weapon slung across his chest. "You turned a potentially catastrophic situation into a manageable tactical problem through superior decision-making and execution. I want to be clear, my earlier skepticism about your presence on this team was unfounded. You proved yourself in the most demanding circumstances possible." Maya accepted the recognition without overstatement. "We held the position because we understood the tactical requirements and we executed discipline under pressure. That's what training is designed to prepare us for." Hartley and Cole performed equally well in their sectors. "We succeeded because we maintained coordination despite the stress." The emergency response team was rapidly establishing security perimeter around the consolidated position and the equipment asset. Captain Whitmore approached Commander Kerrigan, and the 2 senior officers began discussing the next phase of operations. "The destination facility is approximately 2 kilometers away," Kerrigan briefed Whitmore. "We have sustained vehicle damage, ammunition is at approximately 30% across all personnel, and our personnel are at high fatigue status from sustained combat engagement. We need a final push to secure the asset at the destination facility." "Understood," Whitmore replied. I have additional vehicles and personnel. We can establish a secondary convoy that will provide enhanced security for the final approach. Dreskov's organization appears to be completely disrupted. His operational capability to mount another coordinated assault is degraded by his sustained casualties and personnel losses.
Agreed, Kerrigan confirmed. Prepare for final movement to destination. All units, consolidate equipment, assess personnel status, and prepare for tactical movement. We are moving to secure the asset at the destination facility within the next 15 minutes. The evening was transitioning toward darkness, the sun approaching the western horizon. The firefight at the blockade position had lasted approximately 18 minutes, though to the participants it had felt simultaneously compressed and extended, the temporal distortion that characterized sustained high-stress engagement. As the consolidated convoy prepared to move forward toward the destination facility, Maya found a quiet moment to process what had occurred. She had entered the day as a security operative who faced constant skepticism from her teammates regarding her suitability for tactical roles. She was exiting the day having demonstrated exceptional performance under the most demanding combat circumstances, having coordinated tactical responses against numerically superior forces, and having earned the respect of operatives who had previously questioned her presence. The final 2 kilometers to the destination facility would determine whether the mission was ultimately successful, whether the equipment asset would be delivered to secure custody, and whether the events of this day would have lasting implications for how women were perceived within the tactical security industry. The convoy began its final movement toward Port Harborview's downtown district and the secured facility that awaited them. The consolidated convoy moved through the industrial to commercial transition zone of Port Harborview with deliberate caution. The final 2 kilometers to the destination facility represented the last vulnerable window before the equipment asset could be secured behind the reinforced barriers and advanced security systems of the client's facility. Commander Kerrigan maintained radio discipline, coordinating the movement of the primary convoy vehicles alongside the Riverside Emergency Response Team's additional vehicles in a formation designed to maximize protective capability while maintaining forward momentum. Captain Thomas Whitmore's emergency response team had brought additional tactical vehicles and personnel, expanding the convoy's security footprint significantly. The psychologically degrading effect on potential hostile observation was immediate and apparent. Any operatives remaining from Dreskov's organization would recognize that the tactical balance had shifted dramatically in favor of the security convoy. The probability of another coordinated assault attempt had decreased substantially, though Kerrigan maintained heightened alert status as a matter of professional discipline. Maya sat in the rear of one of the emergency response team's tactical vehicles, her weapon across her lap, her eyes maintaining continuous observation of the urban landscape they were traversing. The transition from industrial warehouse district to commercial downtown was marked by progressively more developed infrastructure, more pedestrian activity, and the gradual emergence of normal civilian life interrupted only by the presence of armed tactical personnel moving through the streets. The aftermath of sustained combat engagement was settling into the consciousness of all personnel involved. The immediate adrenaline rush that characterized active firefight was transitioning into the hollow fatigue that followed high-stress tactical operations. Maya's muscles ached with a deep weariness that came from sustained tension and rapid movement between firing positions. Her throat was dry from breathing heavily while maintaining focus during the blockade engagement. Her hands bore faint tremors from the neurological aftermath of extreme stress, though she maintained sufficient control to manage her tactical rifle with appropriate discipline. Officer Hartley transmitted a status update from the lead vehicle. Command, we are approaching the downtown commercial district. Destination facility is visible ahead at approximately 1.2 kilometers. No apparent hostile activity. Urban traffic is increasing, civilian population density is increasing. Recommend proceeding directly to destination without additional tactical complications. Copy lead TAC, Kerrigan responded. Proceed to destination facility. All units maintain alert status, but reduce tactical posture as we transition to civilian-populated areas. We are approaching secured territory. The convoy continued forward, the tactical vehicle's presence beginning to attract attention from civilian pedestrians who recognized the obvious military character of the movement. This civilian attention was itself a form of security. Dreskov's operatives would recognize that operating in civilian-populated areas would draw law enforcement attention and would complicate any further assault attempts. As the convoy approached the destination facility, the character of the surrounding environment changed noticeably. The facility itself was a multi-story reinforced structure with obvious security infrastructure, cameras, reinforced entry points, and uniformed security personnel positioned at strategic locations. This was a professionally secured facility, the kind that had been designed specifically to resist the kind of assault pressure that Dreskov's organization could bring to bear. The convoy's lead vehicles approached the facility's main security checkpoint. Guards in professional security uniforms, armed and obviously trained, approached with professional courtesy. The lead vehicle slowed and came to a controlled stop at the checkpoint, where facility security personnel conducted a rapid identification verification process. Riverside Security, Alpha Tactical Unit, Equipment Delivery Operation, Commander Kerrigan transmitted through the checkpoint's communication system. We have the contracted asset for secure storage, requesting immediate entry and secure positioning of equipment. The facility security personnel conducted rapid verification procedures, checking credentials and confirming the operational authorization. Within approximately 2 minutes, the security checkpoint barrier was raised and the convoy was granted access to proceed into the secured facility grounds. The vehicles moved through the facility's entry corridor and into an underground parking structure designed specifically for secure asset receipt and processing. The reinforced concrete barriers, the controlled lighting, and the obvious security monitoring systems created an environment of professional military-grade protection. As the convoy pulled into the designated asset receipt area, facility personnel emerged to begin the equipment unloading and security verification procedures. Commander Kerrigan coordinated directly with the facility's senior security officer, a woman identified as Director Helena Rousseau, to oversee the asset transfer and formal documentation of successful delivery. Successful delivery of equipment asset to secure custody. Kerrigan reported formally to Director Rousseau. The asset has been secured against multiple coordinated assault attempts during transit. All core components have been preserved intact. Documentation of transfer is being prepared. Director Rousseau examined the equipment components as they were unloaded from the command vehicle. I'm receiving preliminary reports that there was significant contact with hostile forces during the transit operation. Can you provide a situation report on what occurred? Affirmative, Kerrigan replied. We encountered planned ambush positions and coordinated assault attempts at multiple locations throughout the transit corridor. The hostile force was led by Viktor Dreskov's criminal organization, which had positioned significant personnel and resources to prevent asset delivery. We sustained vehicle damage and ammunition consumption, but we successfully defended the asset and completed the mission objective. As the asset was being processed and secured, Maya found herself standing in the underground facility alongside Officer Hartley and Officer Cole. The three of them had shared the most intense combat experience of the mission, the blockade position engagement. They had remained together, coordinating defensive tactics under extreme pressure, and had successfully held their position against assault. You know, Officer Hartley said, breaking the momentary silence that had settled between them, when Kerrigan reassigned you to lead TAC before we left the assessment position, I thought it was a tactical error. I thought he was placing our most exposed vehicle in a worse position by bringing in personnel who didn't have established working relationships with the team. I was wrong about that assessment. Officer Cole nodded in agreement. More than that, you performed at a level that exceeded what most of our more senior personnel would have achieved in those circumstances. At the blockade position, you didn't just provide suppressive fire. You anticipated threat development. You adapted to changing tactical situations. You maintained discipline when discipline was the only thing standing between us and catastrophic failure. Maya appreciated the recognition, but she maintained professional composure. We all performed well under pressure. The mission succeeded because everyone executed their responsibilities effectively. That includes your fire discipline at the blockade and Hartley's vehicle command decisions that kept our options open even when circumstances were degraded. The formal debriefing process began almost immediately. The facility's security personnel conducted rapid interviews with the convoy personnel to establish an initial understanding of what had occurred during the transit operation. The interviews were supplemented by video evidence that was being reviewed from the convoy vehicle's dashboard cameras and tactical body cameras that several of the operatives had been equipped with. Commander Kerrigan provided his formal situation report to Facility Director Rousseau, describing the coordinated assault attempts, the tactical decisions that had been made, and the ultimate success of the mission despite the significant operational challenges. This will require escalated reporting to your client, Director Rousseau stated formally. What you've described is not a simple criminal interference attempt. This represents a coordinated, professionally executed assault operation with military-grade tactical coordination. The involvement of Viktor Dreskov and the scale of force he deployed suggest organized crime involvement at a higher operational level than is typical in Port Harborview. Understood, Kerrigan confirmed. We are prepared to provide detailed briefings to the client and to relevant law enforcement agencies regarding the nature and scope of Dreskov's operation. The tactical quality of his assault suggests he had professional military consulting, which presents a secondary concern regarding the overall security situation in Port Harborview. As the formal debriefing process continued, news media personnel began appearing outside the facility. Word of the armed convoy engagement had spread through Port Harborview, and media outlets were beginning to assemble story elements based on police reports and civilian observations. The story of an armed security convoy engaged in sustained firefight with organized crime operatives was exactly the kind of narrative that generated significant media attention. Facility security personnel attempted to manage the media presence, but reporters were positioning themselves at the facility's perimeter, attempting to obtain visual footage and conducting interviews with civilian witnesses who had observed portions of the convoy movement through the downtown district. We're going to have significant media engagement, Director Rousseau warned Kerrigan. The event has already been characterized as a battle between private security and organized crime. There will be demands for statements, explanations, and tactical analysis. You should prepare your personnel for potential media interaction. Kerrigan nodded with acknowledgement of the reality. Media engagement was an unavoidable aspect of significant tactical operations in civilian-populated areas. The events of the day would become part of the public narrative, would be analyzed and discussed, and would ultimately influence public perception of both private security operations and the nature of crime in Port Harborview. By the time the asset had been completely processed and secured within the facility's vault system, evening had fully transitioned into night. The convoy personnel had been in sustained operational mode for approximately 14 hours, with the actual combat engagement consuming approximately 45 minutes of that time frame. But 45 minutes of sustained combat that had felt infinitely more extended to those involved. Director Rousseau offered facility accommodations to the convoy personnel, acknowledging that they were in no condition to conduct the drive back to Riverside in their current state of fatigue and stress. The offer was gratefully accepted. As Maya was being escorted to temporary quarters within the facility, she found herself standing near one of the facility's observation windows that overlooked Port Harborview's downtown district. The city lights spread out beneath the evening sky, the urban landscape appearing peaceful and normal despite the combat operations that had occurred just hours earlier in the industrial sector. Officer Patricia Gonzalez, the logistics and equipment management specialist who had offered her initial support and warning about the other operatives' negative attitudes, approached and stood beside her at the window. "You were exceptional today," Gonzalez said quietly. "I knew you would be when I saw you during training sessions, but I didn't know the extent until I heard the debriefing details. 9 assault operatives disrupted by 3 people at a blockade position. One of those 3 people being someone that most of your teammates thought didn't belong on the team. That means something, Maya. That means something significant." Maya remained silent for a moment, processing Gonzalez's words and contemplating the implications of what had occurred. The mission had been a success. The equipment asset had been delivered. The convoy had sustained casualties, emotional and physical exhaustion, vehicle damage, ammunition consumption, but no personnel had been killed or seriously wounded. "The skepticism was understandable," Maya replied finally. "I don't fit the profile of what people expect from tactical security personnel. I'm smaller, lighter, physically weaker than my teammates. Those are factual realities. But today, that physical difference didn't matter. What mattered was training, decision-making capability under pressure, and tactical flexibility. Dreskov's operatives learned that size and strength aren't the ultimate measures of combat effectiveness. And now the entire region is going to learn the same lesson, Gonzalez observed. This story is going to be analyzed and discussed. You're going to become part of a larger conversation about what tactical security really means, about who belongs in these roles, and about how organizations should evaluate personnel capability. The implications of Gonzalez's observations settled into Maya's consciousness. The events of the day were not going to remain confined to internal operational analysis and mission debriefing. The story would become public narrative. The media would characterize her actions and performance. And those characterizations would likely become part of a larger cultural conversation about women in tactical security roles. As she lay in the temporary quarters provided by the facility, exhaustion finally overwhelming her, Maya reflected on the full arc of the day. She had started it as a security operative facing constant skepticism from her teammates. She was ending it as a member of a team that had successfully completed an extremely difficult mission through coordinated effort, with several of her teammates acknowledging her exceptional performance under extreme pressure. The mission had succeeded. The asset had been delivered. The team had survived. What came next? The media attention, the public analysis, the larger implications of what had occurred, remained to be determined. 6 months had passed since the convoy engagement in Port Harborview, and the landscape of tactical security operations had shifted in ways that few would have predicted during those intense 45 minutes of sustained combat at the blockade position. The story of the 3 defenders holding their position against Dreskov's assault forces had transcended the boundaries of internal operational analysis and had become part of a broader cultural narrative that extended far beyond the security industry itself. Maya Reeves sat in a congressional hearing room in Washington, D.C., wearing her dress uniform with the newly earned rank insignia of Senior Tactical Coordinator, a promotion that had come through approximately 4 months after the mission's completion. Before her sat a panel of senators and congressional representatives who were conducting hearings on the role of private military contracting in domestic security operations and the efficacy of various tactical approaches to organized crime intervention. Senior Tactical Coordinator Reeves, began Senator Michael Patterson, the committee chair, your performance during the Port Harborview convoy operation has been characterized by multiple independent analysts as exemplary tactical execution. Can you describe, for the record, what you believe contributed most significantly to the successful outcome of that engagement? Maya had been extensively media trained in the months following the mission, but she maintained her natural composure and directness in responding to the question. Sir, the successful outcome resulted from multiple factors. First, the training and preparation that all personnel received prior to the mission. Second, the tactical decisions made by Commander Kerrigan in real-time response to changing circumstances. Third, the discipline maintained by all team members despite extreme stress. And fourth, the recognition that tactical competence derives from training, decision-making capability, and mental discipline rather than from physical characteristics like size or strength. Senator Patterson nodded, making notes before continuing. There has been significant discussion since this incident regarding the tactical performance of personnel with different physical characteristics. Some have argued that your success demonstrates that traditional physical standards for tactical roles may be unnecessarily restrictive. Others have argued that this was an exceptional case that shouldn't be used to generalize about hiring practices. How do you respond to that debate? Sir, I believe the most important metric should be demonstrated capability under operational conditions. Maya responded carefully. Physical characteristics are one factor among many that contribute to overall tactical effectiveness, but they are not the determining factor. I have colleagues who are significantly larger and stronger than me, but who are less technically proficient in specific tactical areas. I have colleagues who are smaller like me, but who are less mentally disciplined under stress. What matters is comprehensive evaluation of multiple capability dimensions rather than reliance on any single physical characteristic. The hearing continued for approximately 3 hours, with various committee members asking detailed questions about tactical procedures, training methodologies, and the broader implications of the Port Harborview incident for private military contracting industry standards. After the hearing concluded, Maya was approached by multiple media representatives requesting interviews. The story had continued to generate significant public interest, particularly after several documentaries and investigative journalism pieces had examined the incident in detail. The narrative that had emerged was of an underestimated operative who had performed at an elite level despite facing systemic skepticism from colleagues and institutional doubt regarding her suitability for the role. The weeks following the congressional hearing saw Maya being invited to speak at various venues, military academies, security industry conferences, women's professional organizations, and universities. Each speaking engagement expanded the reach of the broader narrative that had begun with the blockade position defense. Back at Riverside Security Operations Center, the culture had undergone significant transformation. The incident had prompted a comprehensive review of personnel evaluation methodologies, tactical training protocols, and organizational approaches to capability assessment. Dr. Eleanor Harford, the close-quarters combat specialist who had mentored Maya, had been appointed to a senior position overseeing tactical training and personnel development. The Port Harborview incident has forced the security industry to confront some uncomfortable realities about how we evaluate personnel, Harford explained during a professional development session with new Riverside operatives. We have historically relied on physical metrics, height, weight, strength measures, as primary indicators of tactical suitability. But the research and Maya's actual performance data demonstrates that these metrics are poor predictors of real-world tactical effectiveness. What we should be measuring is decision-making capability, technical proficiency, discipline under stress, and adaptability. Those are the factors that determine who succeeds in critical engagements. Officer Richard Cole, who had initially expressed skepticism about Maya's presence on the team, had become one of the strongest advocates for revised personnel evaluation standards. He had been interviewed for multiple documentaries and had provided detailed testimony about observing her tactical performance evolve throughout the mission. "I was wrong about her," Cole stated plainly in one interview. "I made assumptions based on physical appearance rather than evaluating actual capability. That was a professional failure on my part. But it's also a systemic failure that we need to address across the entire industry." Maya proved, under the most demanding circumstances possible, that capability exists independent of physical characteristics that I had assumed were essential. That's a lesson the entire security industry needs to learn. Officer Hartley had similarly evolved in his perspective, though his transformation had been somewhat different. He had become focused on the technical aspects of tactical performance, working with training personnel to develop new instructional approaches based on principles that had proven effective during the blockade engagement. What Maya demonstrated was that technical execution and mental discipline can overcome numerical superiority, Hartley explained during a training seminar. She maintained fire discipline when ammunition was critical. She identified threat development before it fully materialized. She adapted her positioning to address multiple tactical requirements simultaneously. These are learnable skills. They're not dependent on physical strength. They're dependent on training quality and mental preparation. 6 months after the incident, Riverside Security Operations Center held a formal recognition ceremony for the personnel who had participated in the Port Harborview mission. The event was attended by senior officials from the facility, representatives from the client organization that had contracted the security service, and media personnel documenting the recognition. Commander David Kerrigan presented formal commendations to each member of the Alpha unit who had participated in the mission. When he presented Maya's commendation, he addressed the assembled audience directly. Senior Tactical Coordinator Maya Reeves performed at a level that exceeded the expectations of everyone who knew about this assignment, Kerrigan stated formally. She was reassigned to the lead vehicle during mission execution because tactical analysis suggested her capabilities would be valuable in that position. That analysis proved correct in ways that have had implications extending far beyond this single mission. She maintained defensive positions under sustained assault. She adapted to changing tactical circumstances in real time. She demonstrated the kind of mental discipline and technical proficiency that defines elite tactical performers. But most importantly, her performance has forced this organization and the broader industry to reconsider how we evaluate personnel capability. As the ceremony concluded, Maya found herself surrounded by colleagues offering congratulations and expressing support. Officer Cole approached with a genuine smile. "I wanted you to know that I'm recommending you for the Advanced Leadership Training Program," Cole said. "Your performance in the field has been exceptional, but your ability to articulate the broader implications of what happened has been equally significant. We need people like you in leadership positions, helping to shape how this industry evolves." Later that evening, Maya stood in the Riverside Facilities Observation Area overlooking the training grounds where she had spent countless hours practicing tactical scenarios. Dr. Eleanor Harford joined her, both women observing the next generation of security operatives undergoing training exercises. "The incident has changed more than just how we evaluate personnel," Harford observed. "I've received 17 applications from women in the past 3 months who specifically cited your example as inspiration for pursuing careers in tactical security. That's a direct result of the narrative that emerged from the blockade position. One person's demonstrated capability creating pathways for others. That's significant," Maya acknowledged. "But I want to be careful that my example isn't misinterpreted as suggesting that everyone should pursue roles like this. My experience is specific to my training, my discipline, and my mental preparation. What matters is that organizations evaluate people based on those factors rather than on physical characteristics that aren't actually predictive of performance." "You've become a symbol," Harford said simply, "whether you wanted to or not. The question is how you use that symbolic value. You can either embrace it and use it to influence systemic change, or you can try to ignore it and just focus on your individual career progression. Both are valid choices." Maya considered Harford's words carefully. 6 months ago, she had been simply trying to prove herself to skeptical teammates. The blockade position engagement had changed that. It had elevated her from being an individual operator to being part of a larger narrative about capability, prejudice, and systemic change. "I think I want to eventually transition into training and development," Maya said finally. "Like you did. I want to help shape how the next generation of operators is evaluated and trained. I want to make sure that the organizational culture continues to evolve in the direction that the Port Harborview incident started moving it." "That's an excellent plan," Harford replied. "And I want you to know that we're already planning for that transition. Commander Kerrigan and I have discussed creating a new position focused specifically on personnel evaluation methodology and tactical training innovation. We'd like you to consider filling that role." 3 months after the congressional hearing, Viktor Dreskov was finally arrested by a joint task force of federal agents and local law enforcement. The arrest came as a result of investigation into the Port Harborview incident, which had prompted detailed examination of Dreskov's criminal operations. Evidence gathered during the investigation revealed connections to federal crimes, money laundering operations, and weapons trafficking activities that had previously been unknown to law enforcement. Dreskov's arrest represented the culmination of the broader implications of the Port Harborview incident. What had begun as a failed assault attempt on a security convoy had become the catalyst for law enforcement investigations that ultimately dismantled a significant portion of his criminal enterprise. A year after the blockade position engagement, Maya returned to Port Harborview for the first time since the mission's completion. She had been invited to speak at a community event focused on security industry practices and public safety. As she stood in front of an audience of several hundred community members, security professionals, and media personnel, she reflected on the journey that had brought her there. "The incident that occurred in this city approximately 1 year ago was not about me personally," Maya began her presentation. "It was about the intersection of training, capability, mental discipline, and the challenge of systemic bias in how we evaluate people. I faced skepticism not because I had demonstrated incompetence, but because I didn't fit the profile of what people expected. That's a human tendency. We make assumptions based on appearance rather than evaluating actual capability. But in tactical operations, in security work, and in many other professional fields, those kinds of assumptions can be costly. They can prevent organizations from recognizing talent that exists outside conventional parameters. They can limit our capability by restricting our personnel pool. And they can perpetuate systemic inequities that serve no rational purpose." She paused, allowing her words to settle with the audience before continuing. "What I hope the Port Harborview incident demonstrates is that capability evaluation should be based on demonstrated performance, technical proficiency, mental discipline, and decision-making ability, not on height or weight or physical appearance. If we evaluate people based on those factors, we create organizations that are more capable, more adaptive, and ultimately more effective at accomplishing their missions. As the presentation concluded and Maya engaged with audience members asking questions and seeking advice, Officer Patricia Gonzalez approached with a smile. "You've come a long way from that day when you were just trying to prove you belonged on the team," Gonzalez observed. "Now you're helping shape how the entire industry thinks about belonging." Maya nodded thoughtfully. The blockade position was one moment in time, but it opened doors that I didn't expect would open. It created opportunities for change that extend far beyond my individual career. That's both responsibility and privilege. 2 years after the Port Harborview incident, Riverside Security Operations Center formally announced the implementation of comprehensive revised personnel evaluation protocols that had been developed under Maya's leadership. The new protocols emphasized capability assessment over physical metrics, technical proficiency over assumed strength requirements, and mental discipline over conventional physical characteristics. The protocols were quickly adopted by other major security firms, and within 18 months, the industry-wide standards had begun to shift. Applications from women pursuing tactical security careers increased by approximately 40%. Applications from individuals with different physical characteristics than the traditional profile increased by similar margins. The Riverside facility established an annual recognition award named the Maya Reeves Award for Tactical Excellence, given to operatives who demonstrated exceptional performance in training scenarios designed to assess capability across multiple dimensions rather than focusing on single physical characteristics. As Maya transitioned into her role as Director of Personnel Evaluation and Tactical Training Development at Riverside, she maintained connection with the individuals who had been part of the original Port Harborview mission. Officer Hartley had been promoted to Operations Supervisor. Officer Cole had entered the training development program that had been created as a direct result of lessons learned from the incident. Officer Thorne had transferred to a senior tactical consulting position. Commander David Kerrigan, approaching retirement, reflected on the incident and its implications during a final interview before his departure from active operations. "That mission changed everything about how we approach tactical personnel evaluation," Kerrigan stated. Not because it was the first time someone had performed outside conventional parameters, but because the performance occurred in conditions extreme enough that nobody could dismiss it as anomalous or exceptional circumstance. Maya's capability was on full display under the most demanding conditions possible. That's what created the foundation for systemic change. On the 3rd anniversary of the blockade position engagement, a documentary was released that had been in production for nearly 2 years. The documentary traced the full arc of the incident and its broader implications. The skepticism Maya had faced, the blockade position engagement itself, the media response, the broader conversations about capability and bias that had emerged, and the systemic changes that had ultimately followed. The film was titled "They Called Her Too Weak," taking its title from the refrain that had followed Maya throughout her early career at Riverside. The documentary was surprisingly powerful, not because it glorified the combat engagement, but because it honestly examined the human tendency toward bias and the capacity for systemic change when that bias was confronted with undeniable evidence of individual capability. Maya watched the documentary premiere at a theater filled with colleagues, friends, and members of the broader security community. As the credits rolled and the lights came up, she felt a complex mixture of emotions. Pride in what had been accomplished, responsibility regarding the larger narrative that had been created, and recognition that the journey that had begun with her trying to prove herself to skeptical teammates had evolved into something far larger, a contribution to systemic change that extended well beyond her individual achievement. The legacy of the Port Harborview incident was not simply about one person's tactical performance under extreme pressure. It was about the recognition that capability exists independent of physical appearance, that bias can be confronted and corrected through demonstrated performance, and that individuals willing to challenge conventional assumptions can create pathways for institutional evolution. As Maya stood in the plaza outside the theater, speaking with media representatives and colleagues, she thought about the path that had brought her to this moment. From the young operative who had felt like she didn't belong, to the tactical performer who had held a blockade position against assault, to the leader who was now helping reshape how an entire industry evaluated human capability. The blockade position had lasted less than 20 minutes. Its implications had already extended across 3 years and would continue to influence the tactical security industry for decades to come. Not because of the violence that occurred, but because of what that violence had revealed about the gap between how people were perceived and what they were actually capable of achieving. In the end, that was the true legacy of the Port Harborview incident, not the disruption of Dreskov's criminal operation, not the successful delivery of the equipment asset, not even the media attention and public recognition. The true legacy was the recognition that human capability and human potential exist independent of the categories and assumptions that society uses to organize and evaluate people. And when those assumptions are confronted with undeniable evidence of individual excellence, systemic change becomes possible. That was the story that would be told and retold, analyzed and discussed for years to come. And at the center of that story was a woman who had been called too weak, but who had demonstrated, in the most demanding circumstances possible, that strength comes in many forms, and that capability cannot be confined by the boundaries of conventional expectations. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.